evening and welcome to the fourth meeting of the fiscal year 2021 for the Milton Planning Board. I'd like to call the meeting to order with a roll call of its members. I will call out your name. Rich Beeler.
Here.
Cheryl Tagayas.
Here.
Kathleen O'Donnell.
Here.
Denny Swenson.
Here.
Tim Zerwinski is here from our staff. Allison Quinn is here from our staff. And Julia Getman is here from our staff. We have a couple of administrative items. The next meeting dates for the Milton Planning Board will be September 24th and October 8th. We have some minutes to approve. Denny, I don't know if you're prepared.
I'm sorry. I was prepared, but then Kathleen threw me a loop, so I would prefer to do it next time if that's okay. I'm sure Kathleen's right, but if I could review the tape from last time.
Is everybody okay with that?
Yes, I also want to point out, April, that I made some edits on the OneDrive set of minutes today. So hopefully everyone can take a look at those.
I didn't see those. Did they come through our email? Well,
I sent an email to Julia. I'm not sure if she was able to get it and get it out, but Julia, let me know if there's a problem with the file that's in the OneDrive.
Okay.
I opened it and I edited it rather than saving a copy and resending it.
Okay, I'll look at it tomorrow. I didn't get the email today.
Okay.
Julia, are you fine deferring the minutes to the next meeting?
Oh yeah.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so the next item on our agenda is the staff update. Before we go there, I just want to introduce Tim Zerwinski. I believe this is his first meeting back with us. He is our new town planner, for anyone who does not know. He had been our assistant town planner in the past, so I'm sure he looks familiar to everyone. From Milton, he went to the Boston Planning and Development Agency, where he overlapped with our assistant planner, Allison Quinn. So we've had two recruits from the city of Boston with all of their great exposure to the latest and greatest planning practices. And we, as I said at town meeting, really do have a dream team of a planning department now between Tim and Allison and Julia. We couldn't ask for better. So welcome, Tim. Thank you for everything everybody's doing. And we'll turn it over to Tim now for our staff update.
Everything I know about planning, I learned here in Milton. So, you know, Boston's great, but I don't have a ton to report, except to say that the sort of I think we've gotten our feet underneath us pretty well as a staff. I think you are right in your dream team assessment when it comes to Allison and Julia. They're great folks to work with. I have to really give a lot of credit to Allison for keeping a steady hand on the tiller. She was kind of running the department for a little bit, and it was really easy to start to sort of understand, what's been going on, to get reacquainted with some of the projects and some of the issues that the town is facing. So she really helped and continues to be a tremendous help in her role as the assistant town planner. So I have to give her a lot of thanks and a lot of credit. We've been working on, just getting the office organized, trying to create a good system for keeping our files, the way that they should be, getting things the way that we want to have it, from moving furniture around. And this is all very exciting, I'm sure, to people. But we're really starting to dig our teeth into, some initiatives and some projects that we want to start up. Obviously, we've been working very hard reviewing the three 40B proposals that are in front of the Board of Appeals presently. And I don't know if this is breaking news for anybody, but the fourth one, the residents at East Milton, just received last week its project eligibility letter from Mass Housing. So I think we'll be seeing on the town's website. So if you go to the ZBA page, there's a 40B link that has all the 40B information that was posted as soon as we got it by the ZBA staff. So I think we can anticipate that application coming in relatively shortly. But myself and fellow department heads and public works, fire chief, police chief, engineering, conservation commission, board of health, school committee, have all been looking at those 3 applications and getting our comments ready for the ZBA whenever a public hearing is held. So, we've been working very hard on that. Allison has been working on an inventory of town-owned land. One of the issues that comes up when you're dealing with 40B projects is, are there better sites out there to do some of these multifamily developments? And so we've been working really hard to kind of figure out what's in the inventory of town-owned land, and what restrictions that land carries, whether it's a conservation restriction or it's town meeting may have put a restriction when the town took custody. So Allison's been doing a great job of tracking all that stuff down. It's really important information for us as a staff to have, so that not just when we're talking about development, but open space and recreation planning. For instance, we have a lot of land that's owned by close look at how we're utilizing that land, and really trying to put it to its best use for the purposes that it's there for. Other than that, I'll just say, publicly, I said it in my job interview. I've said it to everyone that's come into my office. I've said it at any meeting that I've been at. One of my number 1 priorities as planning director is to help the town to implement the housing production plan that was approved in January. It's crucially important to me, and I think to a lot of folks in town, that we provide not just deed restricted affordable housing to get out from under 40B and get our subsidized housing inventory up there, but really sort of providing quality, affordable, decent housing for all the folks in town that need it and that want to, take advantage of Milton, which is a really great community. I think it's a great community that people want to live in, and they should be welcomed. So there's a lot of really good stuff in that housing production plan. I recommend anyone that's on this meeting to take a look at it. And like I said, that's a priority for our department. I'm hoping to have one thing that I'll end on this, going through the planning budget, the departmental budget, the planning board budget, the master plan implementation committee budget, just really getting an understanding of what kind of outstanding contracts and obligations we have, and then kind of what we've got, in the piggy bank, so that we can, be proactive and really deliberate about how we spend our money, and really deploying those resources as best we can. So hoping to have a little bit more of a detailed report on that soon. But when you're coming from kind of the operational side of things, once you get into like an administrative role, it's all kind of Greek to me. So I'm trying to figure all that stuff out. But we've got great help in Allison and Julia, who've been doing it for a little bit longer than I have, and also our accounting department and our front office are really great support. So really great to be back. Really great to be back here at the planning board meeting, and looking forward to working with you all.
Kathleen, did you have a question?
Yes, I'd like to, is part of that contract review and money review, taking a look at the 40R contract we have with Judy Barrett? Because I'd really like to see that there's some sort of timeline for movement on that.
Is the 40R contract the same one under which she's running our East Milton working group process?
Yes.
I think so.
Yeah, so I can review that.
So if so, I mean, we've.
Sorry, go ahead, Tim.
No, I was going to say, that contract technically runs through the end of the year. And so we've tried to impress upon Judy, and I think she agrees that, that process that she's facilitated for us, should run its course by the end of the year. So, that's where we're at. If there's a more detailed status report that the planning board is interested in, we can certainly bring Judy in to our next meeting. She'll have, at least 2 meetings of the working group under her belt at that point, if not 3, depending on the schedule. So I think it's, it would be an appropriate time, either next meeting or the meeting after, to bring her in for a status report.
Yes,
I'm
please.
not so sure that, I don't know what is in the full contract. Perhaps maybe somebody would send me a copy of it, because I don't know whether filing the application or an application for a 40R district is included in that. You know, what
Yeah,
she should be doing by this
I
point.
agree. I agree, Kathleen. If you or Allison could circulate just the scope of Judy's contract to us, that would be great. And I would very much appreciate an update at some point. I don't think it has to be 2-hour-long update, or she doesn't have to put together a PowerPoint necessarily, but just a staff update from Judy to the board. I know Cheryl has requested that as well, and Rich, just to kind of get an update from her on where things are and how far along she is on her deliverables after we're refreshed of what those are. Allison, I noticed in the newspaper today, there was a press release about micro grants, and you were the contact. And I'm sorry to put you on the spot.
No, that's okay.
If you could just use this format to just let the community know what that is, because I found that very interesting, and we don't have an economic development committee in town to promote. So maybe you can do so for a moment now.
Sure. So a few months ago, it took quite a while to get the foundations of what this was going to look like moving forward. Because Milton doesn't qualify for DHCD money, we had to sign on to a regional application. So Ashland is the official host community of the grant. But essentially what it means is for the micro enterprise is understood as a owned business within Milton with 5 or less employees. And layered with that is that there's an AMI component. So the owner has to be 80% or lower of the area median income. So the links are online, and it's very simple application. It is a grant. So, they would enter into an agreement with DHCD and Ashland, who's hosting it. And then whichever business it is can be awarded up to $10,000. And I believe that we have close to 170,000 allocated, right, just for Milton.
Excellent. So $170,000 is available. That's 17 $10,000 grants if everyone gets the full allotment. But this is a grant for small business people who make 80% of AMI and do business in Milton, have 5 or less employees. So there is information in the Milton Times. I'm sure there's something probably on the town website. If folks are interested, Allison Quinn is the contact, so I would encourage you to reach out. That's a great resource. Thank you. A little speech here, as we may remember, try not to fall asleep. In accordance with the governor's order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law relating to the 2020 novel coronavirus outbreak emergency, this meeting of the Milton Planning Board is to be held remotely utilizing the Zoom virtual meeting software. The login and call-in information in the Milton Planning Board agenda, which is on the Milton website. There's a telephone number, and there is a meeting ID and a passcode and a Zoom link for anyone who wishes to participate remotely. The meeting is being televised live also by Milton Access Television. So thank you. The next order of business is citizen speak. So do we have the raise hand function still? I don't see it.
Didn't see it.
I don't see it. So if you wish to speak, I guess Milton Access TV will have to, unless there's a better way, unmute everyone.
April, if you will, if you click on participants, I see a raise hand function in the lower right. So if I do it now, does anybody see me raising my hand?
I do, but I don't see a raise hand function in my.
That's because you're the co-host, and I don't think the co-host has it.
Okay.
Yep.
So if anyone calling in would like to raise their virtual hand, go right ahead. I think at the same time, I'm just going to unmute all participants. And if somebody would like to speak, I would encourage you to unmute yourself and speak. And we will call on you. citizen speak, so anything that's not already on our agenda for discussion this evening. If anyone has called in, please identify yourself. I see no one. I don't see any hand raised. So I'm going to assume we have no one to participate in citizen speak. So Tim, let me just ask you to confirm with me that you want me to follow this regular agenda. You didn't do anything out of order tonight, did you? You're on mute.
No. So the public hearing is the first thing on the agenda. I think it's appropriate to lead with that. We had we have a couple things. 333 Brush Hill Road. Dave Crispin is here from VSC to provide an update on 333 Brush Hill Road. That's old business. We want to get him in and out as soon as we can. All due respect to Steve Gallagher, who was after Dave in terms of the de minimis change to Walcott Woods architecture. But yeah, this is the order. So I think it would be appropriate to move on to the public hearing.
Great, thank you. So let's open the public hearing on 227 Pleasant Street, the definitive subdivision application. And again, I will turn it over to Tim Zerwinski to kind of lead this for us. All the members of the board received Tim's agenda or memo, which I thought was very thoughtful and I do appreciate. And why don't we turn it over to Tim to give us a run through of this application and any staff feedback.
So I'm going to sorry, I have the folder open and I'm just trying to see if any members of the planning board want to see a particular document. I can share it on my screen. So just let me know. I'm looking at the same set of documents as all of you. So you can refer to whatever the file name is and page number or whatever, and we can do that. The reason why I want to bring up the memo is because I just want to make sure I have all the dates set. But this is a definitive subdivision application for 227 Pleasant Street. It was previously subject to a preliminary subdivision review. That review doesn't really require an approval or disapproval. It's more of kind of a heads up to the planning board that this is kind of what we're doing. And, it offers the planning board an opportunity to provide input to the proponent, to make any changes or conduct any additional studies for their definitive subdivision plan. So that discussion happened on March 26th of 2020. There were a few pieces of input that the planning board had, including the consideration of drainage and runoff issues, more information about the cut and fill of land on the site, the proximity of the proposed cul-de-sac to adjacent conservation land, and the effect of retaining walls on surrounding trees and properties. The town engineer also at that stage had requested a peer review of the stormwater drainage design, which the planning board engaged LAL Engineering to conduct that review. The department received a draft application for the definitive subdivision on August 7th of 2020. We conducted a technical review to determine the completeness of the application. That technical review on the part of staff is really to go through the planning board's rules and regulations for all the different information and submissions that are necessary for the planning board to make a decision on a definitive subdivision. We didn't make any recommendations as to the wisdom of approving or disapproving the subdivision. It's just the facts from us. But we conducted that review over the course of a few weeks, and there was a formal filing with the town clerk's office on August 26th of 2020. The public hearing for this subdivision was advertised in the Milton Times 27th. Abutters notices went out on August 26th. That's to all abutters that are within 300 feet of the proposed subdivision. I'm not going to go through the whole rigmarole of the planning board's authority in this case. But the criteria for board action is, maybe I will go through the whole rigmarole, because I do think that it is important for people to understand what the planning board is doing here and what their authority is. And this is from the rules and regulations. The board, in considering any proposed subdivision plan, will be concerned with the requirements of the community and the best use of the land being subdivided. Particular attention will be given to the width, arrangement, and location of streets, sanitation, draining, sizing and arrangement of lots, open areas, and parks. Adequate street connections will be required whenever feasible to ensure access to adjoining subdivisions and lands. The planning board may, for cause, disapprove a definitive plan if it violates sound land use planning principles and design. No subdivision shall be approved if the planning board determines that the access roads and/or utility services connecting with the proposed subdivision will fail to meet acceptable engineering standards for capability to handle the expected additional traffic and/or service demand from such subdivision. I'll close with some comments and some issues that were raised by town staff members outside of the planning department, and then also run through the waivers from the rules and regulations that are being requested. Chris Trudell, who is the town engineer, supported the findings of LAL Engineering Group, who had been commissioned to be the third-party reviewer. There were a few issues that have been raised at the preliminary stage that Chris feels that the proposal has addressed. There's a request for waiver of section 5.2.20 of the rules and regulations. This refers to the Milton base, which is the kind of elevation that grading and issues like that. I'll let the proponent and the proponent's engineer explain that issue when they present the project. But Chris Trudell, the town engineer, agreed to that waiver, provided that the final as-built plans use the Milton base as a reference. And I see Jim Burke is here, and he can explain all of that, hopefully in sufficient detail. Steve Ivis, who is the town's conservation agent, recommended that given the presence of ledge on the site, any excavation or blasting that happens, and I hope the proponent can clarify whether or not there's any blasting proposed, be confined to certain hours to limit the noise impacts on the neighborhood. That's, in the case that there's blasting, which we'll get some clarity on that later. Stephen O'Donnell, the chair of the Historical Commission, recommended that the approval of the proposed subdivision reflect the commitment of the proponent in the preliminary stage to reuse the granite in the existing foundation and retaining walls on the site. There is an abandoned quarry in the back on conservation land, and we suspect that some of those granite pieces came out of there, which is pretty neat. So I believe the proponent has agreed to reuse that, and we'll want to make sure that any approval is conditioned as such. I'll just note that the Board of Health has 45 days from the time of the filing to review and approve or disapprove the proposed subdivision. I have not heard from the Board of Health. I can definitely check with them to see if they have any comments. I suspect that they don't, given that their purview in these matters is usually related to the sufficiency of the land for a septic field, and this is a project that's served by sewer. But if there's an approval tonight, we'll want to just make sure that that's conditioned upon a satisfactory report from the Board of Health. Finally, and I'm sorry to go on so long, but I just want to make sure that everyone in the audience at home has a very clear understanding what the planning board is up to tonight. There are several waiver requests. It's in the discretion of the planning board to grant waivers to the rules and regulations if they believe, as I shared earlier, it is consistent with sound, land planning principles. I mentioned the waiver to 5.2.20 earlier, and again, I'll let the engineer explain a little bit more detail about that. There's a waiver request to section 6.1.10, right-of-way widths. The rules and regulations require a 50-foot right-of-way width. The proponent is proposing a 40-foot right-of-way. I'll add a little commentary now that we're in the public hearing. I think that's fine. Happy to recommend that that waiver. There's a waiver request for section 6.1.14, which requires grades of streets shall not be less than 1% and shall not exceed 8% on straightaways, which the street is a relatively straight street. The proponent proposes grades of a range of 3% to 10%. I had the town engineer take a look at this. Understanding the existing topography of the site, it would be unfair to ask them, and probably irresponsible, quite frankly, to ask them to shave down that site to get to the required grades. So he's comfortable with that waiver. There's a waiver, a request for section 7.4.1. Streets that shall be constructed in accordance with, there's a typical cross-section plan for streets in the rules and regulations that require, I believe it's a 28-foot cross-section of sort of curb to curb width. I could be wrong about that, but the proponent proposes a 20-foot cross-section, which again, in my professional opinion, is totally fine. And then the final waiver request, and then I'll toss it over to Marion, is a waiver to section 7.4.5.1. And that requirement is, unless not required by the board, there shall be a sidewalk with the width of 4 feet 6 inches on each side of the street. The proponent proposes sidewalks on only one side of the street. So what I'll say about that, and I don't want to pick on this project because I think they've done everything the right way, and it's a complete application, and it's aside from these waivers, which tend to be relatively reasonable, is consistent with the rules and regulations. And because this went through a preliminary process, I don't want to be a fly in the ointment. But I think in the future, and this is a signal that I'm sending to the planning board and to anyone that's watching at home, I don't think that sidewalks on only one side of the street is a very good idea. I think that we should be having sidewalks on both sides of the street. I think from an accessibility and a safety perspective, I think it's crucial that pedestrian infrastructure in the town, no matter how short the street is or how small the subdivision is really important. I understand that there are trade-offs there in terms of the amount of impervious surface. I think we're all very concerned with stormwater management and where our stormwater gets infiltrated. So I get it. I get that there's a planning principle behind having only one sidewalk on one side of the street. But my opinion is that it's outweighed by the safety and the accessibility concerns. That being said, that was a little soapbox moment for me because, again, I think the project has gone through this process the way that we ask subdivisions to go through this process, and it may be a little late in the game to be mixing things up that way. So I'm not going to formally recommend, voting against that waiver. I think it's okay in this case, just given the process. But in the future, I'm going to, at the early stages of technical review, really recommend to proponents that we have 2 sidewalks. Obviously, it's up to the planning board to make those decisions. And again, I'm not formally recommending to reject this waiver, but I think in the future we should think really deliberately about that. So that's my kind of report on this. And if you'll allow Marion McKettrick to take the reins and talk a little bit more about the project.
Yes, before we turn it over to Marion, I just want to say that was exceptional. So thank you very much for that opening, Tim, and for all of the due diligence that you and Allison and Julia did getting us here tonight. And frankly, in my opinion, which is not reflective of the board, we paid you to have opinions. That's what you're here for. So thank you. Now I would like to introduce Marion McKettrick on behalf of the proponent, give us an overview of the application, and maybe we can pull up, unless you have another idea, Marion, the subdivision plan so that everybody can see the land area that we're talking about.
I think you should. Yeah, please do.
Do you mind doing that, Tim?
Yeah, I'll get that up in a second.
If you want to get started, Marion.
Okay. Yes, I'd be happy to. I'm Marion McKettrick for the applicant. And also here tonight is Kyle Harnish. He's the developer. Jim Burke, who's the engineer, and Joe Janduso, who is the architect working with the developer. So that was a very helpful summary, and it's been very helpful working with Tim Jerwinski since he came on board in August, going through some details for this project and trying to figure out how to address them and not have them left hanging at the hearing. I have to say, as an applicant's attorney, that was a really helpful process for me. So I appreciate that. So this is a 5-lot subdivision proposal, 227 Pleasant Street. It's on a parcel of approximately 69,000 square feet in a Residence C district. There was a house and outbuildings on the parcel. We had to go to the Historic Commission to get permission to take the house down. They determined that it was not preferably preserved, although the age of the house was about 1920, and the same for the outbuildings. So we're working with a site that will be a cleared site from buildings. We also, after our preliminary review in March, we had recommendations from the planning board, we had recommendations from neighbors, we had recommendations from the engineering department. So all of those recommendations have been incorporated into the plan that you're going to be looking at tonight. In addition, there was a peer review process for the stormwater management plan. That went on for quite a long time, it was very detailed. Changes were made, more excavations were done on the site. And at this point, with the work of the two engineers, I think it's a plan that you should feel some confidence in. So in what I have filed in August is the subdivision plan application with a narrative. And my narrative explains what we have done to change this proposal since last March, as well as exhibits, the cut sheets, landscaping plans for each lot and for the perimeter of the development, an existing tree plan showing what trees are coming down, the town's tree advisory committee, which weighed in on the trees, even though it's not a public way, I asked them to look at the trees. The final design for the one street light that we're proposing, a document called a Declaration of Trust, which establishes the homeowners association that will manage the private way, the private sewer, and particularly the drainage system, because there will be a number of drainage structures that will have to be maintained on this site. And also the fencing that's supposed to go around the exterior of the development. I also filed a construction management plan that had been edited and improved since March. There had been some suggestions or recommendations from the planning board. We incorporated those. And then of course, the 10-page site plan that you're looking at right now. I did add a draft easement to the town of Milton because the town of Milton likes to maintain control over the maintenance of the water line, since the water system is all interconnected. So in order to allow them to do that on this private way, the developer has to grant an easement to the town of Milton. And I provided a draft. It will have to be reviewed by town council before it can be recorded. And finally, there is a long stormwater engineering and stormwater report. It has been redone with new calculations since the changes were made. And that is something that if you're not an engineer, you might not want to read through all the calculations. But if you looked at the front in the summary, which is about 7 pages, you get a good idea of the conclusions, which are that with this stormwater management system, this development will not increase stormwater runoff to any adjoining properties. And that's a standard that the development is required to meet. So I'm just very briefly going to just summarize for you the plan changes that we've made since the beginning. Lot layout, roadway, sidewalk dimensions so far remain unchanged. There are still 5 lots. Each lot's about 10,000 square feet. And there's a short private way that you can see on this plan in front of you, ending in a cul-de-sac. There's a sidewalk on one side. We decided to terminate it before the cul-de-sac after the preliminary review. That was basically to eliminate additional impervious surface that was deemed not necessary. We did explain at the preliminary hearing that lots in the front corners would use house designs with porches and other design features, so there would be an interesting view of each house from the street. Houses will be built individually for individual buyers by this developer. So they could be a variety of designs, and I'll be addressing that a little bit later when we talk about energy efficiency as well. We did modify site grading in order to allow the retaining walls to be lower. And we have plans to use all of the existing granite on the site. It's still there. You can see it in piles if you drive by. That will be used in the retaining walls and could be used in the houses as well. From the perimeter of this development, the retaining walls will not be visible. They'll be at grade. From inside the lots, they will be visible, and the landscaping in the back of the lots will set off the walls. But they're going to be of natural stone and granite. They will be attractive, and they have also been moved back from the lot line so that there isn't any chance that the construction of putting up the retaining walls will interfere with root structures in adjacent properties. That's something the planning board asked us to do.
Tim, can you advance that plan to the grading plan? I think it might be next. So, Marion, there's still a lot of retaining wall here, so there's a very small amount of reduction. Is that correct?
Yeah, we didn't take away retaining walls. We moved them back from the lot lines, and we had already designed this so that retaining walls from adjacent properties would not be visible. So they're not sticking up in the air as you look at this development. This isn't one of those developments where you drive by and you see a huge concrete or stone wall that wasn't there before. But we did move them back because there was concern that the work on the wall might interfere with root structures in neighboring properties. As far as the grading adjustments that may have been made, I would ask the engineer to address that, as I don't really have a detailed ability. I don't have the ability to describe that well in summary, and he might be better at doing that. If you want him to do that now, or
no, I think I do have comments and discussion I'd like to do with the grading plan, but I think it would be best after you go through all of your comments.
Okay, thank you. Mm-hmm. You've already reviewed the waivers that we've requested. We didn't have to make a lot of changes in the landscaping plans. The lot landscaping is still the same. It's just a sample lot. We provided one example of what lot landscaping there would be. But for the perimeter landscaping, we made a few adjustments. The landscape designer reviewed again all of the plantings to make sure that they were deer-resistant varieties. We took away the bushes along the front of the property because the Conservation Commission had expressed a concern that, or someone from the commission had been legitimately concerned that roots from those plantings would interfere with the drainage structures in the front of the property. So now we just have ground cover along the front. That's all in the landscaping plan that I submitted in August. As I said, I did have Stack look at the street trees. They were very happy with, they didn't have any problem with them. They told me that the street trees on Pleasant Street were kind of straggly looking. It's a narrow tree lawn. So they've told us that, they'll see if there are any better trees that could be installed there, and they might come back and make a request to the developer. We'd be happy to hear that if they do come back and do that. There is one street light proposed for this development, which is between lots 4 and 5. So it's on the street between the two lots. I think it's at a 14-foot height. I provided specifications for the light, and the fixture itself, the bulb, is going to be the same fixture that the town uses in its street lights, which is highly energy efficient. Once it's installed, probably won't have to be replaced for as much as 20 years. The design is in the exhibits. If you're interested, it's sort of you just have to look at it, I guess. But if anyone is interested in that, we can bring it up. I want to talk a little bit about energy efficiency and energy sources because a question was asked about that at the hearing in March. And this development will be served by electric lines and by a gas line. So but each lot is going to be developed for an individual owner. And that's one of the features of a development that is considered potentially more energy efficient, simply because a developer can design the house as the owner wants it. So if the owner wants to put solar panels on the house, he can. There's nothing in the Declaration of Trust that says you can't have solar panels. And if an owner would like to do an all-electric house, the electricity is there and he'll be able to do that. Whether the appliances are electric or gas, they're going to be the highest possible level of energy efficiency. And in general, the fact that a variety of designs can be requested by a buyer means that there could be further design features that would be more energy efficient. And it's something people are certainly very interested in today. I just want to say finally that Milton is a stretch community. It has been for a number of years. That means that all new development, all new buildings in this development must exceed the state's energy efficiency requirements. And the requirements change all the time. They become stricter over the years, but this development will have to have even higher efficiency design. That means higher than the required amount of insulation, higher than the required energy efficient doors, and higher than the required energy efficient windows. That's something that would be required of any new development in Milton. The Homeowners Association, this will be a development with a private way. Declaration of Trust sets up a homeowners association. The association will have to maintain the road, the sidewalk, the sewer line, the perimeter fencing, and all drainage structures. So the operations and maintenance plan that's provided in the engineering report, it will have to be followed, will be the responsibility of the homeowners association as the years go by. And these drainage structures have to be kept clean. Whatever is required to be done has to be done. I have a construction management plan. The hours now exclude Sunday. That was requested by neighbors, and it was also the intention of the developer, but it wasn't in the plan, and major holidays. The plan prohibits unnecessary stockpiling of materials. It prohibits the idling of trucks before 7 a.m., and there are work hours specified for each day. And also the construction management plan takes note of the afternoon school pickup times for the nearby Cunningham and Collycott schools, because that's also a time of traffic congestion. So deliveries are supposed to avoid the regular congested commuter hours and also those afternoon hours. So that summarizes the changes, except for the stormwater drainage plan. And if it's okay with the planning board, I would really like the engineer to explain the stormwater drainage, stormwater control plan, and talk about, what's been done and why it should work well. And I haven't, provided any summary information, but just very quickly to say, this development will provide a road that will lead to the conservation land at the rear of this property. Until now, that land has had access through an access easement, hasn't been used, is located in some side yards on Dean Road. If it were used, it would mean a fire truck driving through these yards. So once this road is in place, there will be public safety access to the conservation land, and that is an advantage for everybody, I think. It's a small development. We expect there would be minimal traffic impact. There will be some cars, during whatever times people have to go to work. Although with so many people working at home, everybody hopes more of us will be able to continue to do that. That may diminish that effect. Children will be able to walk to school, to the elementary schools on Pleasant Street. And of course, the property tax value of this land is going to increase substantially because of this development, although the homes are likely to be occupied by families with children. So that's a quick summary of the changes that we incorporated into our final definitive subdivision application. And if Jim Burke is interested, I don't know, you may have questions for me, but then I would ask that Jim Burke discuss the drainage plan.
Why don't we have Jim speak about the drainage plan, and then we can go to the board for all questions.
All right. This is Jim Burke. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I'll be brief. The stormwater management system really hasn't changed that much since the last time you saw him. There was some great input from Jeff Kane, the peer review engineer, that kind of tightened this whole thing up. What the drainage consists of is catch basins. There'll be 4 catch basins collecting the runoff for the development and conveying them to 3 separate water quality tanks, downstream defenders, to assist in removing total set of suspended solids and meeting the water quality requirements in the stormwater standards for Massachusetts. To buffer the peak flows, we have 3 underground detention tanks that are pretty significant in size. They're 10-foot wide, 6 feet deep, and there's one that's 90 feet long, and there's 2 other ones that are 76 feet long. The treated stormwater will flow into those tanks and released to a water control structure down at the, I believe that's the easterly corner of the development, and release it, the runoff to Pleasant Street with a reduction in flow from the site, and an improved water quality standards that are provided by the deep sump structures. The watershed itself that flows to the east to the abutting properties, that has been significantly reduced. So we're capturing the runoff that used to flow to the east, and we're capturing that into our control structures and treating the stormwater before we release it to Pleasant Street. Everything ultimately ends up at Pleasant Street. We think this is an improvement for the neighborhood, and given that quick synopsis of the drainage, I'd certainly, if you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
Thank you. So if that concludes the presentation, I think I'd like to open it up to the board. Everybody should be, all of the board members are unmuted unless you have yourself muted. So I don't know who would like to kick us off. Cheryl, do you want to kick us off? I think you said you had some questions already baked.
Right, yeah. If you could go to the grading plan.
No. Okay.
All right, so I'm going to just talk about the grading a little bit. If we could, Tim, zoom into this section, please.
Cheryl, the Zoom is not as intuitive as I would like it to be. Am I in the right ballpark?
Yeah, that's fine. So
Okay.
I just wanted to talk a little bit about what's happening with the grading plan here, and how we had provided some feedback at the last, back in March, about whether the grading could be looked at a little differently, because what's happening here is the property is sloping up from Pleasant Street pretty steeply in the front, and then less steeply here. And I understand that the grading for roadways needs to work according to standards for roadways, and there's a waiver for this section, which is steeper. But what's happening here is this grade of like 128 here is sort of gradually going up. But what's happening right here is it's getting pushed back. So from here to here, that grade is getting cut back to make this fairly level. And what that does is necessitates this retaining wall. And this retaining wall, I think, is necessitated by the roadway. And then we have another retaining wall here. And while it's fairly, like this top of wall here at 141 is fairly at grade here, it does drop down, at least 5 feet down to but here it drops at least 3 feet here. And 3 to 5 or 6 feet along here is actually a safety hazard from this kind of a drop from one side to the other would normally necessitate a guardrail. And I'm concerned about this length of wall with a guardrail for that length. And what that means, you know, for this property owner right here. And it looks to me like, I'm going to clear that for a moment. It looks to me like this could be graded such that this part of the retaining wall might not be necessary. And again, sort of here, so we're cutting in here to make a flat pad, and here we're pushing the soil this way, or cutting it rather into here, again, to make these pads, which is requiring this wall. And it seems a very aggressive topographic change to me. We have a subdivision that we approved a few years ago that's built on Highland, where this also has some topographic change. And the new houses and the grading that's gone in there have sort of blended in. I'm feeling like this is going to look like somebody came in and terraced this property, put these walls in, and look very unnatural. I expressed these concerns at the last, back in March, and I don't really see any change to that in what's proposed here. And if you could scroll up towards the top now, Tim, to the other side of the road. Again, the sort of the retaining wall here, the flat pad, the retaining wall here, the flat pad. So we have this terrace look now when we're looking up the street from Pleasant. It's unlike anything else I can think of along Pleasant Street or perhaps other places in Milton. I think part of it is probably required, but I don't think all of it's required. So I'd like Jim to talk about that. And also I was the cut and fill plan that we were provided was pretty small. And I'd like that plan to be called up and Jim to address that plan relative to my comments here with these retaining walls.
Okay, I guess you're right, Cheryl, with regards to the retaining walls and what they represent. The retaining walls, as the street is cut into that slope, there's really not much we can do with those, given, since we're asking for waivers to go from 3 to 10. So and they're not huge. I believe they're like 4 feet at the highest. For those retaining walls to allow the street to be constructed. As far as the internal retaining walls that provide the platforms for each individual lot, it's really kind of a factor of the architectural homes that are being proposed for the lot, with the porches and the like. The garages are real close to the same elevation as the finished floor. Once you establish, kind of a flat elevation for a single family home, it really kind of dictates what the topography for that particular lot needs to be.
So Jim, can I interrupt you on
Sure.
that point for a second, please?
Sure.
We spent a lot of time on this board reviewing the plans for Wolcott Woods, and on that property, there's extensive topographic change. And we do have retaining walls there, they do, but they don't have this kind of terrace look because they're not making these flat platforms. They're using the topography also, and the architecture can work with the topography. It doesn't require it to be flat. And so I think that I just want to point that out. It's not necessary to make it flat in order to have the architecture work.
Well, it's a different style of architecture. If the homes that I was provided to grade with, you can certainly have exposed more massing, if you will, on the front along Pleasant Street, if you blend that into the grade. So you'd have a lower grade along Pleasant Street and a higher grade as you move further back into the lot. So you have more exposure for to meet the grade of the lot. But you know, they are flat. I mean, you could certainly, you know, provide, the lots are what I think they're 100 feet wide, more or less. You know, you could have, you know, you bring 5 feet across that. So you have, you know, 1 foot exposure at the top and, you know, half a story, if you will, exposed at the other side, and reduce that retaining wall. I understand what you're saying. And, you know, I think it's certainly plausible to apply that style of grading on this particular parcel.
So I think that style of grading would be more consistent with what Milton has, and in terms of working with topography. There's a lot of topographic change all across Milton, and there's no sort of terraced kind of approach to, like I see here. So I would like to see a revised plan like we requested in March, which takes a look at changing that grading to reduce those walls, particularly between the lots, I guess 1 and 2 and 4 and 5. And also along the neighboring property, if, you know, a long wall, I guess that's got to be what, 300, 500 feet or something, that wall was along the left here that we see.
Yeah, it's probably like 250, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, a pretty long wall. And a straight shot, so not an inexpensive thing to build either. So it might, you know, if there were some breaks in that wall, that might be more attractive as well.
Sure.
Can I just ask a question, Cheryl? Because I understand the long wall, but I guess my understanding was if the wall is at grade from the neighbor's perspective, they're not looking at a long wall, are they? Am I misunderstanding this?
No, but people, I mean, you will see, it's really, I think if there were a 3-dimensional drawing that I can see here, when you're coming along here, with seeing wall like that, with seeing wall like that, with seeing wall like that, you know, it's just a very different kind of look than building, you know, things onto or into the landscape. And this is cut in as well. And so there's all of this cut in here. And, you know, this is a very big circle. So there's design choices that are made here that I call aggressive. And I call them aggressive is because they're big changes to the topography, so to the lay of the land. And it doesn't have to be that way. And still have 5 lots that you can build 5 houses on and put the road in. And that would be more visually consistent, I think, with the neighborhood. And that's what concerns me.
I understand that part, yeah. Okay, thank you, yeah. Not that I'm working on the design myself, but I understand what you're talking about.
Yeah. And I think if you, Tim, if you could pull up that cut fill analysis, I'd like to have Jim point out to us, because I think that might help demonstrate what I'm pointing out here on the grading plan as well.
Marion, off the top of your head, do you recall what page is that in the exhibits, or is that in the plan set?
And it's probably the second exhibit. I think it might even be before the landscaping, so back up before the trees.
Yeah, I think it was like one of the first drawings.
No, I don't know. It's somewhere in there.
There we go.
Yeah.
Okay. I wasn't sure if this was the thing. So let me zoom out a little bit.
So Jim, if I understand that plan correctly, those numbers are indicating how much soil is being removed on a.
Correct. So the red represents the cut. There's 8,500 yards coming off this site.
Yeah, so if we talk about cut fill balance, there is none. It's all cut, and there's no fill, and that's my point too. So you drive down the street and you're going to see somebody cut a rectangle out here and put houses in instead of somebody found a way to put 5 houses in that works with the landscape.
Again, it's a kind of a function of you know, a roadway providing access. The lot itself is steeper than the 3 and the 10%, which we're proposing, which actually exceeds your minimum of 2 and 8.
I understand I
trying-
understand that the roadway needs to slope a little differently. I get that, but we talked about already the rest of it. I just think that this graphic hopefully can other board members and maybe others who are watching can help understand what the points I'm trying to make.
And just so you know, the driveways themselves are also 10% to reach up from the roadway to the lots. We're trying to minimize the grading as much as possible. It is, you know, the thought that if we could put in a 15%, road with 20% driveways, I mean, those have, you can kind of go up to New Hampshire and see those in, those mountain retreats that are set so high up above the public ways. But, we're not
So Jim, let's
trying to dig everything out. It's just kind of a lot of the land itself is dictating what we're doing.
Yeah, but right here, you're making a hill and a hill rather than letting those slope gradually up and building your house that lets that land slope around it. And we all know that you can do it this way, even still bringing your driveways in up here. So it's about these where you're pushing. You're pushing this land to make it flat here and have a steep hill here and a steep hill here. And by doing that, you're necessitating all these walls. And if it sloped more naturally, you wouldn't need to do it.
Hang on 2 seconds, because I can't read the numbers. And I'll give an example of what we're up against. All right, so the 134 elevation that we're cutting into the slope near the cul-de-sac, right in front of the cul-de-sac with the landscape circle, that's a cut of about 4 feet. The 134, when we cut that contour has to travel all the way down to where the driveway is for the existing house at 211 for the next door neighbor to the west. So that 134 has to travel probably about 150 feet to the north just to tie into the existing grade.
Yeah, but here it is right here. Making the platform.
Right.
So you're pushing, you're making it do that. You don't have to, it's not doing that now because this is the 138, right? So that 134.
But I have to hit that 134.
Right, so that 134 is, Tim, can you move that? Because I don't think the 134 is there. You're dying that 134 into the retaining wall.
Right, I mean, I can certainly have it cut across the slope like the way you're showing it. I'm just trying to show you we have to meet that grade.
But 134 is down here. So you're dying that contour into the wall there. I mean, if you were meeting it down here, you would have to get from 134 over to here.
Right.
Well, I guess what I would like, rather than try and design it now, I really would like for you to take a better stab or take a stab at doing what I think both, definitely what I requested back in March and what I'm requesting again tonight, which is not such an aggressive terrace look to this site.
The lots themselves are 10,000 square feet, not a significant size. So the thing is, as soon as you put a house on this particular lot, what you're asking is that the foundation is going to be acting as, retaining walls for the slope, for the existing grade of the parcel, and which can be done. It's just a different style of design, and I can certainly provide that.
Well, that's one of 5 people on this board's opinion. We can see what others think, but I do have some pretty serious concerns about what this might look like.
Hey, Cheryl, do you have other questions or comments?
Just on the a totally different level of discussion would be on the construction management plan. There's nothing in it related to blasting. And when we did the Pulte construction management plan, we had a couple of paragraphs related to blasting, and I snipped those and sent them to Tim and Allison, which looks like they've got them here. And I would just like for Marion and the team to take a look at that and maybe consider some revisions that pick up on some of the things there. They had a lot of rock up there. And so there's this section and there's another section too, right, Tim, if you scroll.
The town has a blasting bylaw.
Yeah.
And that should be referenced. Did you reference that? But I don't think we have any
You can
objection.
reference it in your construction management plan at all. There's no mention of blasting at all in this construction management plan.
That's right. I think it's fine to put it in. I'm just asking whether we can put the town's reference in as well.
Yeah, it's here. So if you, sorry, Tim, if you scroll back up a little bit, it does reference the towns right there.
Yeah, okay, yeah,
so.
it does.
Yeah, chapter
Okay.
23, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
But it also references state law. And I think it's just important to put it there because it's the place that the people will, who are doing the work will be looking rather than thinking, oh yeah, there's a state law that I should have thought about.
No,
when
I
did that
think
work.
it should be in there.
Yeah. Okay, so April, those were my two thoughts, or a couple of thoughts from time.
And Kathleen, I see you have your hand raised.
Yeah, because I had a couple of, like, one of them was that issue about the blasting, which needs to be in the construction management plan. I also think, just as a minor point, in this declaration of covenants and restrictions and all that sort of stuff, there's no mention of the cost of the retaining walls that you end up having to build. And I know from my own practice in real estate that dealing with retaining walls that start to fail is a huge issue. And that seems to me that that's a minor modification that Marion could make to that declaration to include the cost of retaining walls. Because that's always a fight.
Yeah, I added fencing recently, but I didn't think of adding that, but it's good.
And then I know you talked about giving an easement to the town to maintain, the water line and all that sort of stuff. Are you also giving an easement to the town to allow it access to the conservation land?
Yes, it's in the easement. I provided a draft easement.
But it has both?
I believe so. Maybe I'll go back and review it.
Yeah,
I thought it was emergency access, and but I'll check. It should be. Both should be in there.
So then my larger question about this is going back to this grading issue is that, and I thought I heard you say that houses are only going to be built as they are sold. So, I mean, depending upon what happens with the whatever, that could be several years down the line before you finally finish all the 5 houses.
Right.
So there's nothing in this that says these houses have to be designed the way you have proposed. There's nothing in is the idea that you're going to grade every site and have it like construction ready? Or are you only going to do the grading as you sell a house?
Well, first of all, this developer is building the houses.
Okay.
But he's building them with, features as requested by buyers, but he has an architect. So he's not selling the lots to a new owner who then goes out and gets an architect and designs his own house.
Mhm.
That isn't what's happening here. But they, in terms of, how much preparation of each lot would take, I think I would appreciate it if Kyle Harnish maybe, or the engineer would address that, because I don't know exactly what the order is, but I would assume that the lots are prepared for, ready to build a house, and then they're ready to sell or to put under agreement with the buyer according to the plan that they agree will be built.
Well, I mean, it's sort of going back to this whole grading issue where you're moving dirt all over the place and, holding on to rocks and not holding on to rocks and all that sort of stuff. I mean, if these are all, it's all going to, and the construction management plan, I mean, if it's all going to be happening, pretty quickly, or you build one house and then the market takes a dive and it takes 5 more years before you build house number 2. I can't believe that you would have spent the money to build the entire roadway, the cul-de-sac, the sidewalk, la, 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 and graded all those sites for stuff that you haven't sold yet.
Well, I'd like to ask the developer to address that since I don't know exactly how he anticipates doing it.
And then my last question is, why is there a sidewalk only on one side? Why can't you have it on both?
Well, it was to reduce impervious area and also to make it, the more
green.
you do to the, yeah, we have street trees on both sides, but sidewalk only on one side. It was intended to make it more green, less urban looking. It's a very short road. So that was the proposal. I mean, we talked about it in March. If the planning board has changed its mind, then we'd be happy to hear that. I mean, maybe not happy, but we'll hear it.
Just wanted to get the explanation on record.
Okay, thank you.
Does Kyle want to speak? I unmuted him if he would like.
I can speak on behalf of your concerns of how I plan to go about the process. Our intention is to clear the lot and put in the road, do all the drainage work associated. As you mentioned, a huge financial commitment to do that. So I think what Marion was trying to explain is that we are going to give an option as we move through the project for clients to secure with me a design build package, and I can add some modifications to the specific house. I have 2 or 3 designs in mind for how I've been planning to do this development, and it's a matter of financial decision for myself and what makes most sense. But my intention is to start with the road, which I have to do, and I have to address all the drainage, bring the utility lines, do everything associated with the lot. And I'm going to start initially on the first house. I can go ahead and build all 5 houses if that's what I decide to do at that point financially, but I do have the option to perhaps pre-construction sell some of these houses so clients can have some input on finishes. I don't intend to get into the process of letting each client individually design their home completely. I am going to give them a set of standards for which we can work in. So that's kind of my direction on how I want to go about this.
Thank you.
April, I just like one other thing, if you don't mind, that I can I mentioned, but I would just like some follow-up on, and that's that question of the code requirement on the guardrail for those retaining walls. I'd like the design team to come back and let us know whether, in fact, what I suspect would be required there would be.
So our intention, I can speak on at least on the side lots that go all the way up that separate our property from the folks on Pleasant Street and the folks on Dean Road. The intention there was to put a fence around the entire perimeter of the property. So that would sit on top of the retaining wall. I believe there's an image of it somewhere of a sketch or an image of what we were proposing. In between the lots that you're saying that would need or require a guardrail, I would likely do something similar in a fence style, perhaps a stockade fence or something that would be sufficient for the code requirement.
So can those fences be added to the plan? The extent of the fences and their locations be added to the plan?
Yes.
Okay. And hopefully you'll consider my suggestion of having a little less wall and maybe a little less fence would be required.
If I can speak on that just for one moment. My concern there is I thought initially, I agree with you, we have great issues. I thought the look of a natural retaining wall is a better look in terms of design, looking up the road, as opposed to, as Jim was mentioning, perhaps having these taller homes with taller foundations exposed, in which then we have to treat a tall foundation wall. So I thought it would be better to work it in with the landscape and a natural stone wall, but I can hear your point either way.
So maybe it's something in between, halfway in between.
Okay, Kathleen, do you have other questions or comments, or are you satisfied? Okay, Denny or Rich, who would like to go next? Denny, I see you raising your hand. Go ahead.
I am interested to hear from the public. I'm also sharing Cheryl's concern about topography and grading later tonight when we're discussing zoning bylaws for the future. I was planning to bring up our earth materials removal and deposit of fill bylaw because of the importance in respecting the impact on plant and tree life when you do extreme grading like this. So I just wanted to thank Cheryl for leading the charge on that. We had asked for that consideration at the last meeting in March. In addition to that, I did want to apologize because at the last time you were here, I had mentioned to the applicant that boxwoods were not deer resistant. Well, I have learned that actually boxwoods are very deer resistant. What I have is Japanese hollies, which look identical to boxwoods, but I just learned they're not. And so boxwoods are fine. They're lovely. They can last up to 150 years if they're taken care of. And now, so I just wanted to apologize for my misinformation. We're learning new things at every meeting, so thank you. But I am most interested in hearing from the public. Thank you, April.
Sure. Okay, Rich Wheeler. Do you have any questions or comments or concerns?
Yeah, nope, sorry. No, great going last because I don't want to repeat anything that anybody said. So just, I think I agree with everything that I've heard so far. I don't have anything right now, but I mean, obviously, like Denny mentioned, it'd be interesting to hear what others have to say. And
Perfect. Okay, so I agree. I don't have anything more to add to the conversation. So why don't we open it up to the public? So if you are online and you have something to say, I would recommend that you raise your hand in the format. And you do that by clicking on the participants button, and you should have an option to raise your hand. If you are on a screen and you just want to wave, I can call on you that way. Okay. Easy. Just please introduce yourself with your name and address, and the floor is yours.
Is that me?
Yes.
I'm Ann Clasby. I'm at 235 Pleasant Street. So I'm a direct abutter. My question concerns blasting, where I am the direct abutter. From the preliminary meeting that we had back in March at the property, I asked about that, and I was assured that the property did not have any ledge and blasting would not be necessary. So I found that hard to believe at the time because my property has ledge, and I know it from trying to do my gardening. So I'm concerned about the blasting. What is the rules or whatever about blasting? I'm just too close to the house number one.
Okay, so thank you very much. Tim, I don't know if you know the blasting bylaw that you want to talk about that, or Marion, I know you mentioned it. I don't know if you want to speak to that.
I unfortunately, at the tip of my fingers, I don't have a lot of good knowledge to contribute about the blasting bylaw. So I think that's obviously if Marion or the development team have some thoughts on that, but I do think it's definitely something we should follow up on.
So I would just add to that if they look at their grading plan and they do less cut, it should require potentially less blasting if they do encounter rock. They work together with all of that cut. And, you know, if you've done any kind of soils investigation, you ought to know where that ledge is. So if you have a report, like a geotechnical report or some kind of soils report, you know, that might be helpful for us to understand in relationship to the question about blasting and the grading.
If I can just add, we've done 5 or 6 test holes, and we have found ledge. And we found ledge at the top of the slope at about 12 feet, and then it kind of rises up. And as you go back, we found it at like about 7 feet. So yes, there is ledge. The maximum cut we have on the lot is 10 feet. And that's actually at the top of the slope where we found a depth of 12 feet. As you know, I mean, ledge isn't a flat type of panel. I'm sure during excavation, at some point, we're going to find some ledge that we'll have to remove, either for the foundation or for the roadway or for utilities or whatever. The equipment that is available today for ledge removal without blasting is significant. And honestly, my recommendation for the developer at this point, it would be just to hammer the rock out and allow, and not blast at all. Now, the time constraint that is associated with hammering the ledge is certainly a lot more time consuming than blasting. But it's, so at this point, I mean, I really don't see blasting as an option for this particular project, but you never say never. The thing is, too, the regulations required to do any blasting in the neighborhood like this is also very significant. And with video survey and insurance policies and the like. So getting the permission to blast through the Milton Fire Department and through the town of Milton itself is a significant process. So at this point, and also, you're right, Mrs. Crosby, the neighborhood is tight. It's, you have 10,000 square foot lots. My recommendation would be to just kind of, hammer the rock out. It's not a huge parcel. It's 65,000 square foot piece of land with a 300-foot roadway. So I'm not too sure how Kyle is expecting to build this road, but that'd be my recommendation.
I have a copy of the bylaw here. You'd have to do a survey of every single house within 500 feet of the plat.
Sounds about right.
Yeah, it's not my intention to blast at all.
Okay, so thank you for that. Is something that you would be comfortable putting in as a condition, that there will be no blasting at the site?
I would be more comfortable with including the blasting language that you provided and adding language saying that alternative methods of using rock will be used if at all possible, because as Jim Burke just said, you never know. I mean, otherwise I'd have to come back to the planning board. Now, I think what was said in March is consistent with what the developer is saying now, which is that he does not want to use blasting, that he would avoid it. But it's better to have that language in there that makes it clear exactly what would have to happen if blasting were anticipated for some reason.
Yeah, I mean, they have to post a bond. I don't know who the committee on blasting is, but the committee on blasting holds the bond.
Or the town engineer.
Yeah. I know the fire department's involved, that's for sure.
Yes, they are. Yeah.
It's an excellent thing on your resume, the committee on blasting. So.
Nobody will mess with you after they see that.
I know.
Okay. Ms. Clasby, is that the remainder of your comments, or did you have anything else to add?
No, I'm just concerned because my property is quite close, and it is a congested area, and I know it wouldn't affect just my house; it would affect my neighbors' houses as well. And structurally, that's what I'm concerned about. My house is old too. My house was built in 1932, so it's a concern that way. Besides the noise and all the rest of it.
Just an example of the number of times I've been involved in a blasting project, and I've been doing this for a long time, 25 years or so, and I've been involved in 3 jobs that they ended up doing some blasting, and all of them were commercial related projects and fairly significant in size.
Yeah.
Well, Pulte property, Milton Woods, I think. There was, I think, a fair amount of rock removal there. And I do think the town did hear about it from some of the neighbors. And I think Denny, you may have some more information about that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it was, there were so many complaints and concerns, and it was very disruptive, and people were very nervous, and it went on and on and on and on. And I'd hate to see this site look like that site. Years and years later,
So what I would ask, then, I mean, I think it's clear that we're not going to get to a decision tonight. So what I would ask then is for Marion to take a look at the language that Cheryl provided from the other permit, and what kind of commitments you'd be willing to make as a condition to the permit. I think the tone of this discussion seems to me that the board is, and please correct me to any of the members if you disagree with this, but it seems as though we would have a strong preference against blasting. And perhaps we wouldn't be opposed to you coming back to the board if it turns out to be required. But I think given the proximity of the neighbors and the concerns that have been raised here by board members and in a butter, that we should really fine tune the condition on blasting. So if you could take a look at that and maybe talk with Tim between now and the next meeting and come to some sort of agreement on what you think your project can live with, but that also addresses our concerns, that would be great.
Yeah, of course we'll do that.
Thank you.
And can I just ask a question?
Yes.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
When the language said that they would need to survey the properties within 500 feet, I was just wondering for the public, what does that actually mean?
Oh, it actually means, let me find it again. They have to do a video survey of the building's existing conditions. So you have a situation where there's a blast. Somebody says, I have a crack in my house. You could say, here's my video of the condition before, and there wasn't a crack in my house. And so now that has to be addressed. So that it's not a field survey, it's an actual building structure survey to sort of see what the condition of foundations and walls and all that sort of stuff of every structure within 500 feet of where you want to blast.
And then what happens?
Well, there's a bond. So
Okay.
the bond is sort of available to fix the situation.
I've seen it too, where there's I don't know what the little device is that's put on the building before that work is done. And then that device can measure whether something has changed. That's not very scientific terminology, but
it gets the point across. Okay, well, thank you, Ms.
All of these are reasons why you avoid blasting. That's all I can say.
Okay. Now, if we can move on, if there are other members of the public who would like to speak, and if we can see your video, raise your hand. If you know how to raise your hand.
It looks like Mark's iPhone has his hand raised.
Oh, okay, good. Let's see. Perfect. If you would please introduce yourself and provide your name and address, and then your comments. The floor is yours.
Yes, it's Mark Murphy, 1 Dean Road in Milton. I live next door to the Clasby residence. And we had similar concerns about not necessarily the blasting, but more of all the drainage work, with the fact that we've been here for 12 years, going on 13, and we've never had any inkling of a water problem throughout, heavy storms and everything like that. And once this drainage work starts, whether it's blasting or not, what kind of, I don't know the bylaws, what kind of protection is there for a residence that abuts this property that suddenly, after this work is done, begins to get water? How does that work?
So, Jim, do you want to speak to this?
We do a study. We analyze existing topography and soils and coverage of land, and we determine flows using TR55, and that is a software program developed by, believe it or not, I think the government back in the 40s. But they kind of folded it into a more conventional software package called HydroCAD. And we throw these watershed areas with the land coverage and the topography and the like, and using hydrologic and hydraulic equations, generate a stormwater model for various storm events that occur. And it goes from a 2, a 10, a 25, and a 100-year storm. Those are your typical storms. A 2-year storm is 3 inches of rainfall, which is a significant rainfall. And you go all the way up to the 100-year storm, which is, I think, 8.3 inches of rainfall, which, you know, has never been measured in Massachusetts. And so we take those numbers and we figure out what's heading to your property, Mr. Murphy, and we make sure that whatever's heading there now is either reduced or stays the same. In your particular case, it's reduced significantly. Right now, for a 100-year storm event, if I remember correctly, there's 4 CFS heading off the property, which includes some off locus areas, you know, some of the up gradient areas that the Jeff Kane, the peer review engineer, asked us to analyze and include in the analysis. We reduced that down to 0.6, 0.7 CFS. So from my perspective, you're well protected, and you'll be able to, this is all public record and how this was analyzed, and it's been reviewed, peer reviewed by you know, other licensed engineers. So I think that is kind of what your protection is. If that explains it, is that helpful?
Yeah. I mean, I don't doubt that you did your due diligence and you guys know what you're doing and everything like that. It's just a natural question to ask, because all around, if you ask different neighbors, for some reason, all around us has gotten water, and we've lucked out. We've just been dry throughout some of the worst of times, and you know, obviously, no one wants to wake up one morning and have that change based on some new construction. So, you know, I mean, we'll go in, like, obviously, you know, we support the development, and you know, just want to make sure that that's really taken into account. And it seems like what you're saying that is the case. If you don't, can I ask one more question before I pass it over? Back to the discussion about, say, for some reason they put the street in and 2 houses sell, and then the lot right that's abuts our backyard for some reason doesn't sell right away, and each individual buyer can kind of build how they want. When we met back in, I want to say February on the site, it was like pre-COVID, I can't remember the date, where Kyle went through, and there is distinct a number of feet off our back fence that the house has to be built by. And I thought there was like height limits to how high it can go up. Mm-hmm. Am I correct in that? I didn't write anything down. I'm just going off memory. Am I correct? Would that remain the same, or can a buyer come in and say, no, we want to extend the back of our yard right up to the side of our fence?
You're protected. I can speak on that, Mark. This is Kyle. You're protected by the zoning requirements that I'm required to abide by with each individual lot. And I think it's getting a little offhand with people thinking they can just design and build their own homes here. That's not my intention at all. I'm just allowing clients to come in at a certain stage and perhaps pick paint colors and wall colors. I am going to dictate the architecture of this entire neighborhood. It's all going to be cohesive. They all have to balance well together. That's why I hired Joe Genduso to be a part of this project. Is we are going to individually design and build every single house here. It's just the client's allowed to pick some finishes towards the end, and that's really it. But we are required to stay within our setbacks, and that is set forth by the zoning regulations of the town. So we are not allowed to build any closer than what I promised you back in March. It's specific guidelines that we are to adhere to, and nobody's going to come along and change that. So I hope that gives you some reassurance there.
Yeah, it does. I mean, the design of the houses that we saw that day and what I saw briefly earlier on the screen, indicated that like there would be a house, say the house in back of our property. There's a house, there's a garage, and the driveway goes up into the garage, blocking any headlights from shining into the back of our house as it's coming in at night. So that would still be the case, I guess what I'm asking.
Yeah, and that kind of lends itself back to what Jim Burke was saying and kind of the grading issues and stuff, is we're trying to eliminate any garage unders because of the topography. We want the garage on the side of the house so we can turn in and try to eliminate any impact on your guys' lots and whatnot. I mean, the fence is going to be on the back. That's what we're proposing, is the stone retaining wall and a fence. My intention is to fence in the entire property so that we're trying to limit any impact of anything going into your property. And just so you know, during the original excavation process, we're required to put forth a storm management plan with when we do the excavation. So we'll have hay bales and we'll have silt fences around the property to help mitigate any runoff during the excavation. But then to Jim's point, when we actually get into the construction, the drainage systems are all tied in to divert water or lessen the impact on your property.
That's perfect. I appreciate that, and good luck with the project. And the quick, whenever you feel like knocking down the structure that we look at every day in the back of our house, feel free to move forward with it.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you very much for calling and for joining us this evening. So are there other members of the public who would like to speak to this application? I don't see any hands raised. Wait one more second. Tim, you don't see any hands raised, do you?
Nope.
Okay. Okay, so members of the board, we should probably discuss whether or not we feel the need to keep the hearing open. We have a couple of issues to discuss. I mean, we're sending the applicant back to look at their cut and fill, the guardrail requirements, to make some adjustments to their plan, to add the fence to the plan, to look at adjustments to the construction management plan to address the issue of blasting, also to think about condition related to blasting, to address some of Kathleen's recommendations in the declaration for the homeowners association, to confirm that conservation access will be provided to the community from the public road via easement. We have a discussion to be had on the sidewalk. So as Tim mentioned, I think we discussed this earlier. I don't quite recall, although I probably should review the March meeting to see where we came down. My recollection was we said that we were comfortable with sidewalk on one side, but we should discuss that. So I don't know if, I mean, Cheryl, you said, Kathleen, I think you said this was a question for you. Denny, you have your hand raised. Please go ahead.
My recollection is that we did have a discussion on sidewalk, and I think we went with the sidewalk on one side for pervious reasons, but we debated it back and forth. But the reason I raised my hand was I did have a final question before closing the meeting, and that was about the topography of the road intersection. They were asking for a waiver, size and so forth, and I just wanted to double check, and Tim might know this. Is there any issue there for safety of vehicles and pedestrians, and does it impact view if the width isn't to code?
The entrance with this does have to meet engineering specifications, and the engineering department has told us what they require. So that's different from the width of the street.
Okay.
So the entrance, but the engineer should address it.
Okay.
You're doing fine, Marion. Yeah. As far as the site distances go, that they were taking a look at, and they're sufficient for the intersection.
And Tim, I know you spoke with engineering about this. Anything to add from the town's perspective?
Nope.
Okay.
Okay, easy. Thank you.
Okay, so where are we on the sidewalk then? I mean, my feeling about it is everything that Tim said, and I appreciate Kathleen's question, and I do agree with Tim that we should be doing a harder line on this. I have a little bit of resistance to the idea that, you know, if in fact, we as a board did suggest in March that a sidewalk on one side was okay. Your mind now in September is a little, I don't know, I'm a little apprehensive about that, but what does the board have to say? I do think we need to give the proponents some direction on this before we send them back.
Well, I mean, we did talk about it and we said, okay, fine, one was fine. I mean, it's just thinking about the fact that he's saying that, oh, these houses, Marion said these houses will probably be sold with two people with families. And you're thinking, well, yeah, they probably might need a sidewalk to walk to school, but it's not a very big street and it's not going to be a lot of traffic. They can cross the street and walk on the sidewalk on the other side. So I'm okay with it.
I do support Tim's suggestion of a larger conversation about the sidewalks. There was a time, I think it was at Pine Tree Brook or Quistit Brook, I forget, one of the developments right on Blue Hill Ave and Canton Ave. Mr. Bob Sheffield, who used to come before this board a lot, came to us and asked if they could put a sidewalk in, because adding a sidewalk was they were required to come back to the planning board to add a sidewalk. And the reason they wanted to add it was for safety of the people who live there. And so I do think where we want to encourage people to walk, and particularly, where you have children that might walk to Cunningham, it would be, we've waived this a lot, and I think it's something we need to come back and look at our rules and regs. Again, this roadway width, the same thing, So I do support that larger conversation. Here with 5 parcels, having a sidewalk on one side is better than in some locations where we actually approve no sidewalk, much to my chagrin on that, because I do think at least one sidewalk is really important. So to me, I am comfortable with going ahead with a sidewalk on one side. The bigger issue to me is already explained, the wall, the retaining walls and the grading.
Yep. Okay, Rich, do you have any comments about the sidewalk?
No, I mean, I tend to, I'm leaning to agree with what Cheryl just said. I mean, It seems like it's a little, or what you said, a little too late at this point. I do think there's kind of what we do and what we've been doing. But I do appreciate what Tim said, and I'd welcome a conversation. Looking forward.
Jenny, anything more?
Yeah, I did want to thank Tim for bringing up his points. I thought they were excellent. I think that one of the things that went into my thought process was the Carberry Walcott estate. We ended up doing one, and we did it because of the pervious issues and being so close to the Blue Hills. And we actually had to fight to actually get the sidewalk to go all the way up and all the way around in that case. And so 5 houses seemed like, oh, easy. But I do think that there are principles and we have to balance them. So you have the pervious and stormwater issues balanced with safety. And I guess generally speaking, safety should trump most things. So I think Tim is right. In the future, we really should be thinking in that direction. But given that we have already had this discussion, and I do think that grading, like Cheryl has mentioned, is a much bigger priority. And I think it would be for the abutters, because when you clear cut all the vegetation and you cut into the earth, that's when you really need the stormwater system to work perfectly, because the plant life is not drinking up the water for the time that all that earth is exposed. So the less grading, the better for the neighborhood, and the better for the ecosystem. So I do think that that's far more important than, anyway, that's where I land.
Thank you. Okay, so we, I think we have enough feedback from the town departments on these other waivers to have a substantive conversation about them, but I don't think it makes sense to do that now because there could be some changes to the grade, and a lot of these issues are related to the grade. So why don't we keep, unless anybody objects to this, I would propose that we keep the meeting open and till our next meeting, reconvene in our next meeting, and see what happens between now and then. And if there are significant change, I want to have the opportunity for the neighborhood to weigh in. But I just rattled off the list of to-dos between now and then. I think the most significant is for the development team to look at this issue of grading and see what other suggestions you might be able to bring forward to us, or if you can't make any changes, maybe an explanation of why and what you did, and get to the bottom of this at our next meeting. Does this
And
make
when is
sense?
the next meeting?
And Marion, I made some notes on the easement and I'll send you an email about that.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Our next meeting is September 24th. So why don't we schedule this for, do we need to identify a time right now, Tim?
I think it would be great if we did. It would obviate the need to re-advertise this. So if
Okay.
we just continue it to 7:05 on the 24th.
Perfect.
So moved.
Thank you.
Second,
Okay, great. Now we have to do a roll call vote. Denny Spencer,
Yes.
Cheryl Tagayas,
Yes.
Kathleen O'Donnell,
yes.
Rich Beeler,
Yes.
April Anderson, yes. Thank you very much. Okay, now moving on to old business, 333 Brush Hill Road. Mr. Crispin, thank you for your patience as always. You seem to always be tucked into a very busy agenda here. Tim, why don't you tee this up for us while I unmute Mr. Crispin? Let's see. Okay, Tim, do you mind just introducing this piece?
I may need a little help with the teeing, if only because there are some issues about this project that manifest themselves in the intervening period when I was not with the town. I was here for the initial site plan approval for 333 Brush Hill Road, so I'm familiar with the very significant and complicated stormwater challenges on that site. Dave was commissioned as a third-party peer reviewer of the stormwater management system, and he has communicated. Well, I don't want to steal too much of his thunder, but he's communicated to us that there's been a significant amount of progress that's been made, and the system appears to be working in the way that it was designed. But there are some outstanding issues that really do need to be buttoned up before he can feel comfortable signing off, and significantly before I think this board and the building commissioner can feel comfortable signing off on occupancy permits for the homes. But Dave, if I misrepresented anything about that, please forgive me and correct me, and I will take a second to bring up your presentation.
All right, you are
Just
right on.
Just 1 minute, David. Just for everybody's edification, Mr. Crispin works for the town of Milton. So he is representing the town of Milton as he makes his presentation. So go ahead, Mr. Crispin. Thank you very much.
You guys are the boss. This is true. But good evening. I feel a little bit like Lincoln. He said 7 years ago. Well, I'm looking at the calendar. It was 2 years and 11 months ago, the first time I stepped foot on this site. The houses were built, the road was done, the storm drainage was installed, and here we are almost 3 years later, and I am waiting for T's to be crossed, I's to be dotted. I pressed very hard to get the grass in well over a year ago. And Tim is going to show you a couple of slides just to bring you up to speed on where we are. First visit, December of 17. When we first met on this site, we realized that the storm drainage was going off in a bunch of different directions. Those little blue hen scratchings there, it was going up to the upper left, it was going to the upper right, literally flowing down. The plan wasn't working, and through what I understand was a rather lengthy court battle that I had nothing to do with, I guess they gave me the honor of helping you solve this problem. So we worked pretty diligently with their engineer, Fred Geisel, and guided him through what we thought would be a reasonable solution. And the next sketch, and these have been in the archives for a little while. If you want to flip to the next one, Tim. There we go. Back up one. He's quick with the trigger. Can you back up, Tim? There we are. This was, and I don't want you to pay a lot of attention to the details, but this was what we suggested to their engineer, and there was a whole bunch of dig here, move here, fix this, do that. And lo and behold, they finally put a plan together. We all agreed on a plan. This was close to 2 years ago, and they've implemented the plan. And the good news is I haven't heard any complaints or seen water flowing basically off the site in well over a year. And I know we've had some very good rainstorms. That being said, give me the next slide for a second. And I've only got 8 pictures here for you, so I'm not going to hammer you. We made a number of requests. Japanese knotweed is all over the place. We suggested that they do a invasive species management plan. We have not seen that. If this board tells me to drop that issue, we can drop that issue, but I believe it's going to be important, at least to the condo owners when the developer walks away, because Japanese knotweed, even today, I did walk the site, is popping up everywhere.
Wow, that's not good.
May I ask a question, Mr. Crispin?
Sure.
Is that going to impact the stormwater system?
I do not believe it will. And that's why I'm saying if the board says, this is not important, then this is not important. But watching this get built, and I'll show you a picture at the end of why I think part of this is important.
Okay.
We've been asking for an as-built plan. Part of this meeting has resulted in one positive thing. I've gotten a call from the developer. I've gotten a call from the developer's engineer. I've got a copy of an as-built plan today. I've got a response to my letter that I've been waiting for well over 6 months for. So I think I'm at the point where I can say, okay, let's meet on site and walk this thing through and wrap this up. We're not, they're at the second yard and goal, as far as if I was to use a football term. They're really close here. We requested an operation and maintenance plan, which is common to almost every development. The letter that came from Mr. Geisel today said it was attached, but it was not attached, so it's not received. And we also suggested that the developer's engineer put together his own punch list to verify my findings. I've not seen anything to that effect really yet. So give me the next slide there, please. There we are. It was actually December of 2019, so that's 9 months ago. I requested a point-by-point response. And I think as a result of this meeting tonight, I think we're finally getting somewhere, so that this is encouraging. And my point is not for you to read that letter, it's just to give you the date of December of 19. Next slide, Tim. There we go. So there is an as-built plan. This actually did not come to me. It came to the building inspector, and the building inspector forwarded it to me and said, is this okay? Because for some reason they didn't want to send that to me. And I will just, if you can see my mouse here, my question was about these trees that are down here in the lower corner. They're over the storm drainage system and over the sewer force main. I requested that they be verified, and the plan that we have tonight has those trees magically moved. So I don't know if they actually moved them or if they just moved them on the plan. So that's one thing I need to talk to the engineer about and see, because I'm sure the sewer department doesn't want trees planted over their sewer lines, and I'm sure that the storm drainage system doesn't want trees growing over it as well. So we need to know what's there and where they really are. And I know the board was concerned about the species of trees and the number of trees. We waited for this plan for over a year so the landscape architect could actually go and see the site with this plan in his hand, verify what was planted and do that. So that's one step that's got to happen before we're done here. Next slide, Tim, please. I think this is, I just want you to take a note on this date, October of 2019. That was 11 months ago. We stopped getting payments from the developer on that. And after about 3 months, we basically said, you know what, we're not doing anything anymore. And we sat and waited for the tennis ball to come back over the net. Well, I think it's finally come back over the net. And I've blocked out the numbers there because I don't want everybody to see that. but it's been unpleasant when you get working for you, and there's a judgment agreement that splits the cost between the condo association and between the developer, and the developer is ignoring it. Next slide, Tim. I hope. One more slide, Tim. I think this is it. Oh, just even though there was a payment issue in June of 2020, I did get a draft memo from their engineer, and I responded in yellow as to what I thought needed to be done. This is about a 6 or 7 page letter, so I'm not going to bore you with a lot of details. But June, July, August, September, was it 4 months ago? I responded what I felt needed to be done. Finally get another response today. So this has been very frustrating to me. And one more last slide, and why I've been concerned. The one on the right, actually, this is a picture of the grass that was there close to well over a year. We were told it was too wet to grow, it was too dry to grow, we didn't have time to grow. I don't know, every excuse in the world of why they hadn't grown grass. And lo and behold, now they find if they put irrigation sprinklers out there, they can grow grass, and it looks much better today. So why that took 2 years to do, I don't know. The one on the left is kind of a safety issue, but it goes with that invasive species report. That is behind the first house when you come in on the right. And it is a pile of loose rock that's about 6 or 7 feet high. I can tell you, I would not want my grandchildren anywhere near that. And it's not on the plan to have a loose pile of rocks back there. But why can't you see it? Because it's covered with Japanese knotweed. This picture was taken last winter after it had died down. And lo and behold, magically appeared a pile of rocks. We had known this was there, and we've been told a number of times it has been repaired and covered and regraded. And I can tell you, looking at it today, it's still there. So there's some T-dotting, there's some I-crossing issues that, as Mr. Clark put it, the subject of the agreement between all the parties was make Crispin happy, and everything's done. These little items kind of need to be addressed to make me happy, unless I'm directed otherwise by you folks. And that's where we are. So I expect I will hear from the developer's engineer on Monday, and we'll do a site walk next week. See if we can close this out. The good news is the drainage system is working. It looks like they've solved 99% of the problems.
Well, that's good to hear. So I will thank you very much for your efforts, because you've brought us, even though it's taken an extended amount of time, you've brought us far along in addressing the concerns of the abutters on the water runoff issue. I would just like to make a statement myself that I completely support Joe Prondak withholding any sort of occupancy permit until every one of these issues is resolved. I don't know if any members of the board have any other addition.
I agree.
Yeah, and just so you know, Bill Clark did keep me, when I was chair, up to date through sharing correspondence that he and Mr. Crispin had sent, and asking me if, if I concurred that no C of Os are going to be issued until more satisfactory responses were done, and that Mr. Crispin was satisfied. And that was the consistent response that we had. So, and I thank you, Mr. Crispin, for your continued efforts, because, lack of payment, I respect the fact that you need to be paid for your time. And you've continued for nearly a year without that payment. I do think that the town should be quite thankful for that.
Just to be clear, the condo association has paid their share, so they've been very good, and I communicate with them from time to time as well.
And honestly, I don't think the C of O should be issued until you're whole on your efforts on behalf of the town.
Right.
So, I mean, I support everything that you're doing. I think you're doing an excellent job. I support everything Joe Prondak is doing to really hold the line on this. So if he needs our support, Tim, in any way, I think the board, unless anybody objects, would agree that we think all of these things need to be issued. Mr. Crispin needs to be compensated for his time and effort on behalf of the town. And until all of that is done, I hope we don't see any finality here. Anybody else have any comments on this?
I totally
Yes, Debbie.
I see the document that showed the tree plan. I spent a significant amount of time walking the site with all the different parties, and I just wanted to get an update on the trees.
Yeah, what this is the as-built plan that they put together last March. It took a couple of months to get to me because it came through the building inspector's office. But they didn't identify species. I'm not sure they actually surveyed these locations or they just sketched them on there. And at that point, I was basically shutting down for non-payment. So I was reluctant to send my landscape architect out there to verify species and size and all of that at that point.
Yeah, I mean, as I recall it, there was going to be some more trees. I'd have to go back to my notes, but there were going to be some more trees to the back left. And over to the right, I was concerned about some trees dying. They looked like they were going to die. So we had a plan in there that the developer would have to replace those before they left if they did in fact die.
I can tell you they did die, and I don't know if they've been replaced one for one at this point or not.
Mr. Crispin, did your comments mean to imply that you do intend to send a landscape architect out at some point in the future?
I think as soon as we're confident that payment's going to be made, yes.
Okay. So Denny, would you want to join?
Sure. Yeah, I would like to do that. I'll tell you, I'm actually kind of discouraged because I spent, I can't tell you, a whole week of my life working, debating this out and fighting for every single tree and every single thing, and to have it just sort of dismissed, and not by you, Mr. Crispin. Thank you very much for all your hard work, but this developer, when I think I'm not going to lose patience. I lose my patience with this one. And also on knotweed, knotweed is very invasive, and it's one of the reasons you don't want to leave any construction sites empty, because it just fills up with that plant, and that plant can be very damaging to buildings. It can be very damaging to hardscape, and it can just destroy gardens. So anybody nearby, the rest of the condos, I'm sure that they're dying for that to be resolved. And then the way that they covered up a mess that's an eyesore, but not only that, a danger to the children living anywhere near it, is also very, very discouraging. So I would be happy to, if your landscape architect does go out, I'd be happy to do a site walk at that time too.
Sounds like a plan. We can let you know on that.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Sorry to bring you down into the mud on this one, but that's where it is.
No,
well,
sorry.
we're doing better than we were 2 years ago. So thanks to you.
You have made progress. We have made progress on a lot of things. The storm water was the most significant thing. Mm-hmm. I'm really glad it's not flooding down the hill any longer, because that was just very discouraging.
Yeah, just for information, I won't take long, but there was a picture about 3 or 4 weeks ago where the roadway in front of unit number 1 had about 2 feet of water in it. And there was accusations the system wasn't working. The problem was the silt sacks were still in the catch basin. So there was a bad thunderstorm and it flooded up and it went down through the system like it was supposed to. Those silt sacks are now gone. The site's stable. That's fine. So in case you hear about that, that's what it was from.
Okay, thank you for that. And if possible, I'd like to make that site walk public. I'm getting emails. I'm getting texted right now by some of the neighbors, and they have been very, very helpful in the process. So I would like to, if it's okay with the rest of the board and Mr. Crispin, I would like to allow that to be a public site walk when the time comes. And I can reach out to the neighborhood and they can spread the word. I don't know that we would need to post it just to allow the public to join me.
When would you think about that? A weekend or an
We
evening? Or
probably want to post it, Denny.
Okay, we can post it. I'm flexible. I could do it.
Yeah, I think-
Maybe. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, I think we should probably let the landscape architect determine what works for his schedule and post it, and hopefully as many people as can come. And if we need to do some sort of supplemental walk, maybe Tim or somebody from our team can do it at another date. But I think it's probably important to get that work done as soon as we can. And given the complications in not payment, and we need to get them paid, and then once they get paid, we should probably get them out there as soon as possible. So my preference would be that we work around the schedule, just to make sure that this can happen sooner than later, because if there are issues, we need to flag them to be remedied before we're under 3 feet of snow.
And
Or no
also the
snow.
weather. Yeah, weather considerations. I agree. Do it as soon as we possibly can. And I'd be happy to do a follow-up site walk with the rest of the public that couldn't make it to the first walk if there's interest.
Okay.
I will let
Can
you know.
I can I?
Yes, Tim.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Dave, to cut you off there. I think my internet is getting a little shaky. For my kind of personal and professional edification and potentially the public's, can someone with a little bit more experience with this settlement agreement kind of walk through what it means and what it entails? I think this is kind of at the heart of the non-payment issue. And so it would be helpful, I think, for me to understand what's in it and what it requires. I don't know if that's for Dave or Cheryl or April or anyone else that was here when it was signed.
So, I mean, Tim, do you feel like we need to do this in the public meeting, or do you think we can do this maybe with Kevin Freitag offline?
You're the boss, April.
I mean, I can't tell you the specifics of it right now. I know Kevin Freitag was intimately involved. If Mr. Crispin or Cheryl want to go into it really briefly, but we still have 3 other
I
things
think you
on our
should.
agenda.
I think you should just do that offline.
Yeah, I just don't want to keep. I don't want to keep everybody on.
So can I just add one comment though, Tim, just for the public's interest as well, is that the reason the site ended up with a lawsuit and these kind of settlement agreement had to do with the lack of performance, and part of it was a disagreement amongst the condo association and the developer that they sold development rights to. So some time ago, when they came and applied for these 3 houses, they did it as a condo association, and then after they got that approval from the planning board, they sold those rights, and there became a very challenging relationship between the developer and the association. And in the meantime, the progress on the site development had stopped. And the neighbors, which particularly where you see home number 3, up in that corner, were just getting flooded with stormwater from this site because the site was not stable. And then the other thing that we discovered in that time period, with the help of Mr. Crispin, was the fact that they hadn't followed the plan, in particular the limits of construction, so where they were allowed to do their work, and the position of the homes was different. There were just many things about the plan as they were implementing it that were different. And so the design that had been approved in the stormwater that had been peer reviewed was no longer going to work because of these changes and the fact that it had been clear cut, and we had been very specific about not clear cutting it. So it had to have a redesign, and Mr. Crispin assisted, and then some of his earlier slides there showed his analysis. And so the planning board really got involved in this because the neighbors alerted us to the fact of this disagreement between the parties was having significant impact on them. And the board worked quite extensively to help come to some kind of solution that would move this along. And that's where the settlement agreement the modified approval came from. So
Thank you
that's-
very much, Cheryl. That's exactly what I was looking for. My primary concern here is getting Dave paid. So I just want to, have all the information there.
I was on the board when this was came to us for that approval of those three. And so I too, like Denny, have been frustrated over the last several years because I raised the issues like I have been all along on grading, on limits of work, on not having trees removed. And that's why I think Denny and I both harp on these things on every application, because we've seen what happens if it's just left and not done properly. And you can't assume that it's going to be done properly.
And if I could add to that, they didn't just like move one of the buildings slightly. They moved it something like 50 feet, and they took out thanks to Dave Crispin, who was able to impressively look over Chrome Google shots of trees, assess that they took out something like 50 trees outside of the tree management plan. And, it's amazing the impact that those two things did to the stormwater system, making it practically useless for the neighbors behind the two properties in the back there. But we oh my goodness, we learned a lot on this project about the value of trees and vegetation. And when you clear cut a property like this, it does it has incredibly bad effects on the abutters' water issues.
And even adding to that, Denny, I'm sorry, Dan.
I'm sorry.
But just even adding to that, I think we learned a lot about process, and that's why we're going through these process improvements, and that's why we're engaging every department head in advance of every application, and we're getting all the comments either in writing directly from them, or we're memorializing them in these memos so that we have something to look back on, because in this particular application, we didn't have a lot of background information on what the discussion was or what had taken place. So I think it's informed our process too. So it was I think a traumatic experience, probably the most traumatic experience for me. So my term, but that's why I'm so thankful to Mr. Crispin for stepping in for us. And that's why I'm adamant to see that you get compensated for your time and for your efforts on our behalf, and that all of your recommendations be implemented, because until you joined our team, we were making no progress. So we very much value your input, and we thank you on behalf of the abutters and the community at large and the condo association and everybody else that you've been helping. So thank you very much.
I hate to make light of this, but you ever hear about the guy asked him, why are you pulling that rope?
No.
Question is, do you ever try pushing one? That's what this job has been like.
I hope that doesn't mean you'll never work with us again. Now, in the interest of time, thank you very much. We're going to move on to Walcott Woods, the de minimis change request. Tim, if you would please prep us for this discussion.
Yeah. So again, thank you, Dave. And if Dave is still here, I think I might be gone. I'll touch base with him on Monday and figure out what our next step is there. Sorry, I'm trying to get out of full screen mode over here. So we had gotten a request from Northland Development, who is the developer of the Walcott Woods project, regarding what they hope the planning board will determine to be is a de minimis change to the configuration of a few of the housing units in one of the pods on the site. So I'm just gonna, if you just give me half a second to bring up the document that we were provided, I will do that, and then I'll pass it off to Steve Gallagher, who is the Northland's project manager on this one. So
Steve, is
let me
this
share
your
my
first meeting
screen.
with us?
I've been to one back in the fall, but
Okay.
it's funny to be on the internet.
Well, welcome. We're used to seeing Jack, so we'll welcome you. Not that we don't welcome Jack.
Okay,
Welcome to the town.
All right. So I don't know if it makes sense for me to give kind of a 10,000 foot overview of where we are. We started construction last fall, and we've been mainly looking at phase one site infrastructure. So that's basically done at this point, which is the biggest portion of site infrastructure of the project. So there's a lot of, stormwater infrastructure down by Canton Ave, and that's all in. It's all, landscaped, there's grass growing, and it looks great. So a lot less disruptive than it was a few months ago, which is nice. And we're now kind of moving into the phase of vertical construction, initially with Devin's house. And we just today got building permits for the first 2 of the new units behind Devin's house as well. So building 1 and building 2 are going to be going up shortly, and then we're going to move up to the intersection, which is why we're here. So in the spring, as you know, we had Union Studio come in and provide new architecture, and that was pretty well received. It was approved, and they've continued on to do construction documents for that. And as they've done that, they've kind of worked through some of the details, especially with Ryan Associates, our landscape architect. And I think they've identified some positive adjustments, I would say, that they can make at various points around the site. And they're not dramatic changes to the scope of the project or anything like that, but I think they're just, you know, good, smaller adjustments that we can make. And you saw one of those a couple months ago, which was the reorientation of 2 single units in Devin's cluster and in the Manor House cluster, kind of creating a little bit more of a sense of public space, you know, a kind of definition of the space with the buildings. And that was also approved as a de minimis change. And this is really kind of a little bit more of the same. So one thing which they were able to do, which I think was a major improvement, was separate the garage units between many of the units. So obviously it's kind of a design goal to avoid long stretches of garage doors. And there's various ways you can do that with massing, but really it's nice to separate them if you can. And in the C unit, which is one of the units in the duplexes, they were able to pull the garage doors away and create, you know, some living space in between. It's a more appealing streetscape. And the other thing they were able to do with the new designs was make them a little bit easier to offset the finished floors so that they vary from one building to another. And there was actually a little bit of discussion on one of the earlier discussions in this call that is related to this, because the previous architecture did have finished floors that were consistent across the 2 units. And what that resulted in was a number of retaining walls, not massive ones, but there was quite a few retaining walls around the site. And because we're able to offset these finished floors, we're able to kind of let the buildings flow with the grade, so to speak, a little bit more naturally, which reduces a lot of those or eliminates a lot of those retaining walls. And the fact that the garage doors are moved apart from each other allows us to have the grade flow naturally and have the driveways be separate from each other rather than kind of combined. And it really makes the grade work a lot better. But the one caveat is that in that configuration, you need the C unit to be uphill, really, because you don't want the master bedroom basically to be, you know, looking out their window and see the grass like a football window sill. So it works a lot better rather than, so really that's what this is for the most part. They've kind of reoriented the building such that the units are in different locations. I mean, the footprints are the same. It's just, you know, where you had a B, D, you now have a B, C, and so forth. So, I mean, just to be specific about it, we're looking at 3 buildings here. So building 5 is what we're proposing as a CD, and it was originally a CB. Building 11, we're proposing as a DB. It was originally a CD. It was originally a CB, and then building 5 is originally a CD. It is a CD. It was originally a BD. So essentially, sorry that I kind of jumbled that there, but essentially each building is rotating one spot in a clockwise direction. So building 5 goes to building 6, building 6 goes to building 11, building 11 goes to building 5. Same buildings, same designs, you know, same footprint locations. It's just the building was in one spot, now it's in the other spot. So the architecture is all the architecture that was approved, but it's just a change that allows the site work to, you know, it's more natural. It reduces the number of retaining walls, which I know is a goal, and it just creates a more appealing streetscape. Not a dramatic change, but it's, you know, like I said, a minor positive change, I think. So I'd be happy to answer any questions about that if you have any.
So I have a question, Steve. So the 3 buildings that we see here, this is the DC, the BC, and I can't see the label on the bottom, but I'm assuming that's DB.
Building
this is-
11 TV, is that, if that's what you're asking?
So that's what these three buildings would look like this.
Yes, and those are the same, that's the same architecture that was approved already. So the buildings are the same buildings, it's just, and frankly, I mean, I'm not sure how many people would even, you'd have to kind of study the original plans to know which one was which. But I
Weren't
mean,
all the garages next to each other?
sorry,
Weren't there 4 garages in a row without those window structures in the center? Is that what you're saying is the change?
in 2019, well, so to back up a second, in the 2019 special permit, there was different architecture, and there were, the garage doors were a little prominent. And in, as part of this thing, this spring that we did, we were able to separate a lot of those. And I think they were able to do some other things in the places where they couldn't, that, you know, changes the massing a little bit to soften the impact. There are, you know, in any duplex that has a C in it, which is a number of them, the garage doors are separated by the master bedroom in the C unit. So that's what those windows are that you see. But again, that's already been approved, and we're already, you know, planning to do it. It's just a question, what building is in what location, such that we can get the C units up on the uphill side.
So who has questions?
I have a question. Sorry, Denny, did you have one first?
Yep.
I did. Steve, you mentioned that the floor elevations didn't have to align now, which thank you for picking up on the conversation earlier that I was talking about with working with the topography better with these things, because I feel as if there wasn't as robust a dialogue about how that can work. But in any case here, these elevations are showing them at the same elevation, the floor elevations.
Yep.
So is it that D and C1 would actually shift up one or the other, or is it B and C1 that are all of them shifting a little bit? Because here they're all shown at the same elevation in
Yeah.
this.
That's right. That's right. There, I mean, if you go around the site, it's a little bit different depending on the topography, but in many cases, they are going to have split ridges. So, you know, you'll have, whether it's 18 inches or a foot or something along those lines, depending on where it is, they are going to be different from each other. But
So just a question, is that roof going to be split right through there, for example, then?
I'm sorry. Oh, yeah. That would be, yeah, it would be at the point where the units transition.
Yeah,
That's
so
right.
there'll be a split in there? Okay. I just want to understand that, but
Yeah, and again,
I have no trouble with this shift. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, what that allows us to do is, there actually were a number of places where there were tiered retaining walls. So there's quite a bit of retaining walls. And I think this, you know, ability to kind of go with the grade, it will appear much more natural than it would have originally.
Absolutely. So that's why I have no trouble with what you're suggesting here. And in fact, I'm glad to see that you're coming back. One of the things I really appreciate about you and the team coming back to us is that you're adjusting as you see, as you're working on the site. And I think that's just makes the project better. And the less retaining walls, even though they can be attractive visually, it is more disruptive, as we've spoken about. And so that having the whole idea about this, and Jack Dolly talked about this, was to have things fit in. And so to make these minor adjustments to have it fit in better, I'm all for.
That's great. And to your point, I think we may be back again, you know, as we work our way around the site for things that are similar to this, not dramatic changes, but adjustments.
Okay, Denny, you had something?
I was wondering, I was looking at the drawing and it looked like building number 4 and building number 3 have the driveways changed. I think it's an improvement if they have, but I was just.
Yeah, so that was part of the, if you recall, a couple of months back, there was that de minimis change for the Manor and Devon's House clusters, the way that they were oriented. And that was, so what's being shown in that sketch that I did there in the top left is the new configuration that was approved a couple of months ago. So it is a little different than what it was, but it's actually less impervious paving.
Yeah, I like it. Thank you.
Rich or Kathleen, any comments or questions?
Nope.
Rich?
Nope.
Okay. I have none either. I think this looks great. And to Cheryl's point, I think we really appreciate you coming back. As I said last time you were here, that the path of least resistance for an applicant is to just build what's been approved. And I think it's a nod to your professionalism and your deep desire to create a quality project that you do keep coming back and sitting through 2.5 hours of other discussion in order to get something like this approved. And we very much appreciate it. And I'm sure that the end result will be beautiful and that the neighbors will appreciate the attention to detail. So thank you very much. Do we need to take a vote on a de minimis change, Tim?
I think so.
Yeah. Okay. So does anyone want to make a motion to approve the de
I
minimis?
make a motion to approve the minor change to the building configurations as proposed.
Second. Okay, let's do a roll call vote. All in favor? Denny Swenson,
Yes.
Cheryl Tagayas,
Yes.
Kathleen O'Donnell,
Yes.
Rich Beeler,
Great. Yes.
April Anderson. Yes. Thank you, Steve.
Thanks a lot.
April, can I just chime in real quick? I know for the last de minimis change that was approved for this project, there was a letter that kind of articulated what the change was. Is that something? Does that need to be signed by you? Can that be written and signed by me? I think it's good to have a record of these things outside
Yes.
the minutes.
Yes, I think we should authorize Tim to sign that letter.
Agreed.
So moved.
All right, let's take another vote just to authorize that. Okay.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. Do we have a second?
Second.
Yes.
Okay. All in favor, Cheryl, roll call vote, Cheryl Tagayas,
Yes.
Kathleen O'Donnell,
Yes.
Denny Swenson,
Yes.
Rich Beeler,
Yes.
April Anderson, yes. Okay. Check, check, and check. All right, now we're on to a discussion of the Community Preservation Act. This was suggested by Kathleen, and I appreciate it very much. The Community Preservation Committee, or Act Committee, reached out and asked us to do this as well. I don't know, Tim, if you want to talk about this at all.
First of all, I want to apologize for not having been on mute earlier. The assistant to the planning director came up and wanted to smooch goodnight. So
I loved the little voice.
So I don't have a ton to say outside of the fact that town meeting, as you're all probably aware, recently voted to approve a ballot question to adopt the Community Preservation Act. This is the second, I think, go around for the town on CPA.
Yes.
That's all I'll say for now. So I think whatever the board wants to discuss is fair game for you all. So
Kathleen, do you want to say a few words? I know that you recommended that we discuss this.
Well, I just wanted to make sure that we were, aware of the fact that there is going to be a vote. We don't have a number for the question yet, but it will be on the ballot this November to pass the Community Preservation Act. We are the only town in our area that hasn't adopted. All the rest of our butters have, including the city of Boston a couple of years ago. So we're hopeful that it would go through this time around. It would provide funds for affordable housing, for historic preservation, recreation, open space, capital improvements, and that sort of thing. So I just wanted to make sure that people watching the planning board realize the fact that I'm not asking for a vote or anything like that. We wouldn't be doing that, but just to say that it would be something that would help us carry out the master plan initiatives, and also would provide some funding, we would hope, for some of those improvements that we talked about in the Milton village, Lower Mills, with the kayak landing and all that sort of stuff could be funded with some CPA money, which would be great.
And so essentially how this works is it's a additional tax.
Yeah.
And do we know what percentage is recommended?
I don't think they're going for the full 3. I think it might be 2. But you can go, I think on the web, I think that there's all sorts of information that provides people with how much their taxes would increase, which is what the city of Boston did when it did its campaign. When you went online at the assessor's office, there was a thing that showed you how much you'd be paying. I think on average, it's like $80 a year.
Yeah, there's a website, yesformilton.com.
Yeah.
And the information is being populated quite a bit. I think they're rolling out even more information this week and next. But that calculator is on that website. And so people can put in their assessed value, and you can, it'll calculate what the increased tax would be. So, and Kathleen's right, they looked at it on average, it would be, I think, $82 for the average home. So of course, if your home is more or less than the average price, then you would pay more
Yeah,
or
and
less
there
than that.
are exemptions for, low income and elderly and all that stuff.
And the first $100,000 of everybody's value is exempt.
Right.
So,
And the way that it works, as I understand it, is the taxes collected by the town of Milton to be used for these specific purposes that Kathleen just identified, that there are additional funds that become available through the state and also through, is it the deeds tax through Norfolk County?
No, well, yeah, there is a proposal. Yeah, right now, there's a state match that's funded by every document that's recorded at the Registry of Deeds. They all went up. The average document went from $75 to $105 just in December, and all that money goes into the state match for the 175 cities and towns that have adopted it. That's a fund that when in the beginning it was 100% match, and now it's probably down to about 17%, something like that.
I think there's also an organization that Kathleen wasn't heavily involved with. And Kathleen, is it the organization?
It's the Community Preservation Coalition, and Tom Callahan is now the chair of that. And the one thing to remember about this is that the money, there's a Community Preservation Committee that then takes proposals from people in the town for projects, and there is a planning board member usually on that committee. And then all the proposals to spend the money are done through town meeting. The committee doesn't decide it. It's not the Board of Selectmen, it's town meeting. The Community Preservation Committee comes forward with articles for town meeting that talk about what we would like to fund or not. So it's something that's a decision that's made by the town, not by, the committee or our board.
So that organization, Kathleen, that Tom is now chairing, the website, they have examples of what other towns have used CPA funds for. Is that correct? I know that Easton, for example, the Ames Shovel Factory, which is a historic building that was converted to housing, I believe, where they were able in part to do that using CPA funds, both for historic preservation and for affordable housing. And sometimes people would ask here in Milton, why couldn't we save that historic building, or why couldn't the town buy that building, or could we do less units on that site, or can we buy more affordability? And a lot of people would have said to me when I've asked some of these questions is, well, if we had CPA funds, we could do X, Y, and Z. And it's a tool that could help us as we're trying to think about how do we save historic assets, or how do we provide additional recreational opportunities, or how do we reach our affordable housing goals? And we're leaving that tool untapped. And in fact, our monies, the monies that Milton residents pay in, goes to other communities rather than coming back here. So it's one of the few opportunities where you're getting your money matched by the state in some fashion, as well as the tax contribution.
Jenny?
Yes. I was curious. I want to be sensitive to a lot of people in the pandemic whose work has slowed, and some people are unemployed. And I was wondering if there are hardship waivers for people who are in situations like that, and also seniors on fixed incomes. I just was wondering if there was anything in the process that was sensitive to those two groups.
There are certain exemptions that are, that are allowed for with seniors, low income. I can't remember the exact language for our ballot question, but I think that does provide for those exemptions. And there certainly is that ability you have to ask for it. It doesn't happen automatically. But.
And is there such a thing as a hardship waiver for somebody who's been unemployed for 6 months or something during?
It's income.
It's
So,
income.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So if they're unemployed, their income would be presumably be low enough that they could ask for that.
Okay. Thank you.
So my perspective from the capital planning committee is that there's a lot of capital planning needs for the Parks Department in particular, and one that consistently comes up that I've experienced is the Lower Guile Road field at the high school, which is just in a complete state of disrepair, and frankly, I think it's unsafe because of drainage and stormwater issues. We never seem to have the resources to be able to get that going. And actually the capital plan, recommended capital plan this year did include some early stage resources to get them moving forward on some design work and engineering to hopefully bring a fully formed improvement forward, but it got cut because of COVID and other competing demands. But that's an example, a very tangible example of a field that plenty of kids play. My kids play baseball, and there's football, and there's all sorts of soccer down there sometimes. And it's literally unsafe, and we can't find the resources to improve it. So this would give us some additional town resources from the taxpayers that would also leverage additional state resources. And as a town meeting member, I get a letter every year from the North County Treasurer's Office that says, here's all the money that Milton would have been eligible for had you adopted the Community Preservation Act. And it really bothers me every year that we're not able to take advantage. Well, maybe that could get this project going, among other things. So there are a lot of really interesting things that could come out of it. And I see Rich Beeler has his hand raised. Sorry, Rich, I don't mean to.
No, that's okay. I just two questions, and I can appreciate all the comments, and makes sense. Are we taking a stance as a board on this, or?
No.
Okay, so just in the interest of time, do we have any?
True. I mean, I don't know if we can't. Is there a reason why we shouldn't, Kathleen?
Well, I didn't want to put anybody in a position where they felt like they needed to do that.
Well, we don't have to tonight, certainly. I mean, I think we have a lot of good questions, and people should really inform themselves a little more. But I don't want to eliminate the potential, because at some point, if anyone recommends that we bring the discussion up, I would not be averse to suggesting that the planning board take a position if others felt it was appropriate.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I would rather us just be let's either take a position, but we're just talking about it. I mean, it seems like we're taking a position, but we're not taking a position. So if we are taking a position, I would have comments, but you know what I mean? It more seems like we're promoting it, and I don't have any input I'd like to give. So, I mean, we can continue on this, but my question would be, in the interest of time, do we have anything after this?
Well, next on the agenda, we're going to talk about zoning, but zoning.
No, I think he means, is there any deliverable on this CPA?
No. I meant, what do we have, on the agenda? I know we have another line item, but it's 9:40, and I don't know if we're going to have enough time.
Okay.
Yes. Okay. Oh, yes. So if you have another comments or questions, by all means, go right ahead. We have other business. The last thing on our agenda, I'm sorry, I misunderstood. Denny was correct. Last thing on the agenda is discussion of 2021 zoning articles. And I think that's intended to be very, very quick updates from folks that are working on the articles, and maybe a very, very brief update from Tim on what we can expect at the next town meeting. But if you have more to say on the CPA, please do.
On the CPA, can I just add one thing, April?
Yeah.
I've been a member. I decided to join and be a member of the committee. There's 25 people on the committee who are working on educating Milton residents, and there's going to be a lot of messaging that's going to be coming out next week about it. So, maybe everybody can try and follow that, and we can bring it up again at the next meeting. But part of it.
This is on the ballot for the spring. Is that correct?
No, it's November.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Education, about it is important. So I think Kathleen, bringing it up tonight is the idea that people who are interested, who might be watching, even board members who are not familiar with it, can go to the website and start looking at the information that's available. I do want to say, because I'm on the committee, I was doing some outreach. I reached out to Alex Whiteside. He supported this when it was put on the ballot, some 8 years ago or something like that, Kathleen. And he's supporting it this time around also. And he thinks that it provides resources to help achieve goals in communities where resources are tough, to cobble together. So he's putting an endorsement comment together that'll probably be utilized by the committee as well. So I just wanted to throw that out there if anybody's interested in talking to him about his thoughts about that, that he served on this board for many years. So, members of the select board are individually endorsing. I individually am endorsing CPA. So I just to give you a little background, Rich, on what other committees are doing as well, like the Historical Commission has taken it up. Stephen O'Donnell, the chair, is personally endorsing. And so there's outreach to a lot of other boards and committees as well as the planning board.
Go ahead, Rich.
I agree. I don't see the relevance in the planning board meeting tonight to promote CPA. I just don't. I mean, it's 9:42, and if we have other agenda items, I'd just respectfully ask that we put, this seems more like, and again, I'm not trying to be nasty, but it seems more like a commercial for a yes vote, and I'd rather have that at the end of the meeting so that, I'm just not interested in getting involved in the politics of it right now. I think there's a place for people to go to ask their questions to get, real answers, I'm sure, on what does this mean to us? What does it mean to our taxes? I just don't think it's the planning board's purview to talk about taxes and what does it mean about us spending, or what does it mean about calculators. That's just not what we're here for.
I just want to respond to that a little, Rich, because I had that concern myself and I didn't want to position anybody. So I reached out to every member of the board to see if it was okay if we added this to the agenda, and everybody said yes. So if we want to just continue the conversation another time, that's fine. If we want to shut it down now and go to zoning, that's fine. But I do take your point.
Yeah, no, and I apologize if I might have misunderstood the question. It sounds like a great topic. It's just I'm not interested in trying to force it, talk somebody into voting for CPA. I want to talk. If we want to talk about what matters to us and how it might help us, that's fantastic. But again, yeah, I would just ask that maybe we put it at the end.
I actually didn't have anything. I was just gonna put it on the agenda to just sort of say that it's up for a vote, and I've said what I've said. Don't need to say anything more.
Okay, let's move on to the discussion of 2021 zoning articles, not 2020. Tim, you want to just tell us really quickly what's going on with town meeting and why we don't have any articles for the next town meeting? I'm happy to do it.
Yeah, you tell me. So I think one of the main issues for a December town meeting would be, I believe it would be an appropriation for the fire building committee. I need to get a little bit more educated on that, actually. But there was a request from the town administrator's office to let him know if there were any planning articles. I think I got feedback from everybody that there's a couple irons in the fire, but maybe none that are quite ready for December, which we would need to have things pre-baked by, I think, next week is when the warrant closes. So I think unless this is something for the board to discuss right now, but I think there are a few things that are imminently close, it sounds like, but maybe not quite ready for December.
April and Tim, I understand that the select board might consider another special town meeting in January, February. And that might be a more realistic timeframe for us to have some zoning articles that might be already being worked on, such as the ones Kathleen and Denny are working on.
Yeah, so we want, I mean, the deadline to get things into the town administrator, I think was next week, or to the selectmen was next week, which was just not going to be feasible because we weren't even meeting again until tonight.
I hadn't planned on that.
Yeah, no, I didn't. I don't think anybody did, but I just want to make sure that everybody knows what's going on. So there could be another town meeting. I would love to hear from Denny and Kathleen and anyone else who might be thinking about zoning, where you are in your article and whether you think that's a feasible option or if you think this is more a spring time frame or anything else you want to share. Because I know you're doing great work.
Go ahead, Denny.
I think springtime is more reasonable, but I'm happy to quickly go over one tweak to, well, actually, it's a couple of tweaks to a bylaw that I think could be ready by, well, spring or, yeah. And then I had some rules and regulations. So should I describe what I'm thinking of for trees, or did you just want the answer of when I think it should go?
No, I mean, I don't know that we need to get into the content as much as maybe we
Okay.
can talk about just how far along you think you are and when you think you might be ready to have a more fully informed discussion so we can block out some time on an upcoming agenda.
Okay, so I'm ready to hear back from people about, I provided the earth materials removal and deposit of fill bylaw section, zoning bylaw section 4A. And then I have 3 rules and regulations, which have to do with the rules and regulations that impact tree damage, where we see the most tree damage. I thought I should start there. In addition to that, I'll be meeting with the Shade Tree Committee next Thursday night to go over their ideas of a potential bylaw. But I took a step back. Instead of starting a whole new bylaw, I actually strategized with Alex Whiteside, who was very, very helpful in looking at it from a holistic perspective of what it is that I want, or we as a board want to see, less damage to trees during construction. So,
Denny, I'm sorry, I didn't get a chance to review what you sent yet, and I thank you for putting it together because we share an interest in this, and so I will look at it and get you any feedback. But is this a new section of the bylaw? Just quickly to understand this portion that's up here on the screen.
Sure. So yeah, so what you see in yellow is added language to an existing bylaw.
Okay.
So this, and you'll probably recognize some of, well, actually you'll recognize what I did in the regulations where I said we want to see trees on plans. That was a Cheryl Gaius request and reasonable. The earth materials removal and deposit of fill, we wanted some continuity between the ZBA and the rules and regulations. The rules and regulations are of the planning board, and then this zoning bylaw, we kind of talked about it in 2 projects tonight. Actually, you know, when you're clearing a site, we want people to be thinking about trees. I reached out to John Leonard of the ZBA, provided him this language because it would fall under their authority. And he was very supportive of adding the suggested language. And he said that this is long overdue. He said that the proposed tree protection amendments to this bylaw are clear, reasonable, and in the best interests of the town, abutting neighbors, and the environment. And he elaborated to explain that a good number of projects have come before him, and people just don't, the applicants and all of their experts just don't bring up trees. And this gives them, the zoning board, the opportunity to bring up trees. And in a way that's consistent with the way that we bring up trees. So he was very welcoming of this concept.
Right.
Right.
Do you want to schedule this with Tim for an upcoming agenda when you feel as though all these conversations are had and you have, I think you've provided this to
Yeah.
us, I haven't had it either, but
Yeah,
if you were ready for a
to.
discussion now. I mean, not
Yeah.
tonight. the
Right,
next meeting?
I'm ready for the next meeting.
Okay.
I would love to get your feedback. If I could also report that I did, I reached out to Lisa Ahern, the superintendent of the cemetery, who is very knowledgeable about trees, because in the rules and regulations, I refer to the International Society of Arboriculture, as for their guidelines. They have what I found to be very clear and concise and helpful, informative guidelines. And I thought it would be really helpful. It helps our planning staff, Tim and Allison and Julia, to be able to, when an applicant comes in, to say, here are Milton's a tree-friendly town, and here are the guidelines for taking care of trees. I mean, the greatest damage that we see on the planning board, from what I see, is when tree roots get compacted, or roots get cut, or grade gets altered. And these guidelines all address those issues. So I'm sorry, I'm taking up far too much time at 10 o'clock at night. So, but that's sort of the background, and I'm ready to talk about it in detail once you've had a chance to read it. So next time would be great. But I did get support from her. She agreed. She said these were the best guidelines that she had ever seen. And we had a wonderful discussion. In addition, the Shade Tree Advisory Committee chair got back to me, and she was very pleased, and she's sharing the language with the rest of the committee and invited me to the next meeting. And the chair of the Historic Commission, Steve O'Donnell, appreciated my sharing these documents and keeping him in the loop. He said it seemed like this approach was very comprehensive. So I feel like we're off to a good start. So let's keep the momentum going.
Great.
Thank you. Thank you.
So Kathleen, you want to give us just a quick update on what you're up to?
Well, as I said, I'm working on that condo conversion. I got some comments from Alex. I have some comments from Cheryl. When I get through the closing terrors that I'm in at the moment, I will adjust that and then send around a draft.
And then maybe we can schedule that for an agenda meeting.
Yep.
For discussion. Okay.
There's another one that I'm sort of working on too, but I think that's going to be it's a lot harder to figure out, is the accessory unit. Accessory
Yes.
dwelling one.
I love that one.
I'll have that draft as well, but that one's not as finished or as prepared as the condo conversion one is.
April, I'd like to make a recommendation that Tim earlier said that one of his goals is to really help promote the housing production plan. There are a number of recommendations in that plan that require zoning revisions and require the action of this board. So if Tim could report to us, I mean, we adopted it. We voted to adopt it, to support it, you know, as we all remember. And I did serve in the working group that worked with the consultant and the housing committee on that. And there's some really good things for us to consider. One of the ones that I'll just throw out there is, you know, two families. We have two families scattered throughout, and yet we make it very difficult to build any new two families. So is that something that we should be looking at for maybe the spring, or maybe not even spring? But I would just like for us to help advance that. And the other thing I'd like to point out is that the you know, the master plan is 5 years since it was adopted, and I think I'm going to. Again, I've been our representative to that committee and chairing it for a long time. But one of the things we're going to do is step back a little bit and take stock of what's been accomplished. But there may be a few things in the plan that require planning board work as well. And so I'd like to bring that back to us.
Sure.
As you know, we had that running list of zoning initiatives that has been kept, and we check off some and we add to it. And so if we could bring that back up and kind of take stock and add these things to it. And I'm especially interested in advancing East Milton's planning. And I think, you know, if that's a 40R district that comes out of that, or another overlay mixed use that comes out of that. I know there's interest in people doing things in East Milton, and I just don't want us to get, so we miss the boat and say, gee, it's too bad we didn't do something sooner over here.
Right.
So
I'm looking forward to that, reviewing that scope of work as we discussed at the top of the meeting, and getting an update from Judy and seeing her work wrapped up by year end, and then seeing what we can do with it from there. So I agree with you. So anyways, I want to say thank you to everybody for indulging having this long meeting, which 10 o'clock now seems like a long meeting. We've been busting through these pretty quickly lately. But after our little respite there in August, we had a lot of work to do. So thank you for that. But if no one has anything else, I'm going to ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
There you go.
Do we have a second? Okay, let's do a roll call. Cheryl Tagayas,
yes.
Rich Beeler,
Yeah.
Kathleen,
Yes.
Jenny Swinton,
Yes.
April Anderson. Yes, thank you. And we will see you on the 24th of September.